and indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I never said it right.
I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Can we do the roll, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Lorraine Koss.
Here.
Charlie Venuto.
Here.
John Byron.
Yo.
Vinnie Taranto.
Here.
John Windsor.
Here.
David Lane.
Here.
Karen McLaughlin.
Here.
Stephanie Ely.
Here.
John Durkee.
Here.
Courtney Barker.
Here.
Todd Swingle.
Here.
Danielle Bowden. Terry Casto and Jean Artusa have asked to be excused. They're out of town on travel.
Thank
And
you.
we have a quorum.
Thank you. Now, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Also, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from the previous meetings.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Virginia?
Morning. Welcome to the Board of County Commissioner Chambers. Different setup. We did the best we could to try to get at least the 7 members across the front and the alternates over there, and staff is over here, and we've got a new setup for panel discussion down here, so we'll see how it works. IT and Space Coast Government TV were down here adjusting camera angles and whatever yesterday, so it's not our regular digs, but hopefully it'll work out well for us today. What did not work out so well is we emailed you your agenda packet last Friday like we were supposed to, and sent it to be posted on the county's website, and it's not ADA compliant for the blind. So we've spent the week trying to reformat it, and we're making progress. A couple people from IT were helping us with that, and then it was time for the county's budget to be posted, and that also was not ADA compliant, and so all resources got shifted. So our agenda is still not posted on the web, and that's just, it's a county-wide problem as we try to adjust to this new software. The bylaws say that we have to email it to you. We did that, so we're not in violation of anything. We just are very concerned that we're not as transparent as we like to be. So anybody who wants the agenda packet, if you'll give Carol your email, we can get you added to an email distribution list, and hopefully we'll get all this website stuff worked out soon, but it's a big learning curve for the county. I also wanted to talk very briefly about conditions out in the lagoon. The Banana River continues to bloom, and reports of strange colors in various canals come in. There were a few fish kills reported last week, but no counts of fish, so as far as we know, those were small, isolated events. The dissolved oxygen levels have been dropping below 2 at both the Water Management District station in the Banana River and the Orca Kilroy stations in Sykes Creek and the Barge Canal. Every so often, a couple nights a week, they're getting below 2. So as the waters continue to warm up and don't hold oxygen as well, we continue to be at risk for fish kills. The bloom concentrations have been coming down in the last week in the Banana River. They're going up in Mosquito Lagoon. Titusville and Melbourne to Sebastian have been looking better. There's growth of Caulerpa macroalgae in a lot of places that some people think is seagrass recovery. It's mostly not seagrass, it's macroalgae, but at least it's holding those sediments still and providing some forage and habitat, so it's a step in the right direction. So with that, I'll get into the progress report. Last Friday, we completed a 320-foot oyster reef down at the Riverview Senior Center in Palm Bay, working with the zoo and many volunteers. We executed 3 more project contracts from the plan. One of the things that's slowed us up this go-around was a bunch of the projects that were approved in the last plan update were with nonprofit groups, and we didn't have a contract template for that, so we now have a contract template for that and are working to get those contracts executed. Breeze-swept septic to sewer monitoring, you saw Dr. Claudia Listapad came and presented the early data from that. We had set that up as monitoring, pulling samples every other month for 2 years. Because we saw that very rapid precipitous decline in nitrogen values, the plume so quickly, we amended that contract to go to monthly sampling for a shorter period of time. So hopefully we will capture the information we want sooner, and that's good news. You probably, sorry, Terry, was that a question?
Yeah, so we went to monthly, but are we continuing it for 2 years?
Not unless we see a need to. So we think that, we didn't know how long we would need to monitor to see those levels drop from where they were clearly impacted by septic systems to not. And because we've already seen that very rapid decline, we think that's happening quickly and we don't need 2 years of monitoring. So we wanted to capture data more frequently, especially during the wet season, to see that decline happen and understand what the pace of that is. If we get to the end of our money and we don't have the answers we need, we can certainly extend that contract through a change order. But right now, we were keeping the dollar amount the same, the number of samples the same, just changing the timing.
Well, it hadn't really gone through the rainy season. And
Correct.
so probably a longer period of time will give us more data, more rainy season, since there's variability. So as much as I appreciate the rapidness monthly, I'd rather we go a longer period of time to actually document what appears to have happened, but through a longer weather period. If we can afford it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we had about 6 months of data before the retrofit occurred, and then we were going to have 18 months of data afterwards. And so now, we did a couple months at every other, we did 3 sampling events at every other month, so that's 5 months. And then we have 15 left that will be monthly, so I think we will have the entire wet season, the entire dry season, and we'll be, back next summer before the money runs out. So we can share that data with you, and obviously, if we haven't answered the question, we want to keep gathering the data. But Florida Today, yesterday, and there's been a lot in social media concerns about perfluorinated compounds in the groundwater, and so we did a quick modification to sample for those in the wells that we had installed last month in the Satellite Beach area. And so that sampling was conducted this week. It'll be about 3 weeks before we get results back from the lab. But we hope to have that in time for the city's community meeting. And I don't know if Courtney, if you want to say anything else. The city's also doing sampling. The school board is also doing sampling. So hopefully in 3 weeks or so, we will all have a lot more information.
glad to share that report as soon as we get it.
The Miko sewer extension project, those groundwater monitoring wells have also been installed and sampling has begun. Kings Mill stormwater project, the survey is completed. We're working on land acquisition for that site. Engineering design services are underway for the Huntington Pond stormwater project. The muck dredging master permit, we continue to push that project along, working with the agencies, trying to get through the various hurdles that they have to ensure that there are adequate protections despite a streamlined process. The O'Galley muck dredging expansion project, we not only has a task order been executed for design and permitting, but we've already scheduled the pre-app meeting with the agencies. The you had asked for a process timeline, suggested that it would be useful for people to understand all the steps that have to take place for these types of projects. We've drafted that and shared that with, given a copy to John Byron this morning since the suggestion came from him, and so we'll get his comments and hopefully bring that back to you at the next meeting.
Ginny, along those lines, do you still have a sixth billet funded by the trust fund that's not filled?
Yes.
You might give some thought to putting a contract wrangler in there. Somebody just to ride her. The difficulty we have is we have a project that's in the project plan. It receives funding for the fiscal year it's in, and then it goes this long, very slow process through the Python to finally end up with a shovel digging something. And I think if you have the resources to throw at just simply working the RFPs and qualifications and contract management and so on, that may be a useful thing to do. I suggest you think about that.
Thank you. Do you want to talk about, that?
So we sent out the plankton video to you all through email. We put it up on social media, both on YouTube and Facebook, and looking at the information, the statistics from the videos and all the posts that we do, we actually had that as our highest performing post to date on our Facebook page. So just to give you an idea, we normally see about 234 on average reach, which is how many faces it gets in front of. And with the plankton video, we actually had 13.5 thousand reach. So that was, great, and we had actually over 1,000 interactions with it, so people actually clicked on it and either shared it, commented, passed it along, watched it. So we were really happy about that, and we started doing some Facebook Live broadcasts as well. So we were out at the Riverview build for the oyster reef, and also went out on the boat with the muck finders with Marine Resources Council, and those also were very high performing posts. So we had 3,000 to 5,000 interactions with those. And the other thing that's been high performing on the page is I started posting whenever we have new contracts. I have a little graphic that says what's new, and we mention what contracts are out there, how much nitrogen and phosphorus it's removing from the lagoon, and each one of those we've put out since has had 1.6 thousand in their reach. So we're really happy that those are getting out there and people are sharing them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. It's budget season, so our budget for next year has been submitted through the county manager's office, and the millage rates are coming to the county commission on Tuesday, so we'll get an initial read on how the proposed budget is being accepted. We've been working on, with the help of finance, getting internal order numbers assigned to all of not just the current year projects, but next year's projects, so that those are ready to go. And some of them are even getting started this year, where we have funds available and the partners are ready to move those along. And your financial forms have been updated to reflect that. The financial report will obviously change format with the new ADA compliance. It went from the 3-page version that you have to a 7-page version. So we'll just expect things to look different next month, and that's the reason. So work underway this month. We continue to work on the replacement for the septic moratorium, and we've negotiated a project using Arc Inlet and some Monte Carlo statistical analysis to try to get a better handle on how far from the water septic systems make a significant difference. And so that information, in addition to informing the septic ordinance, will also be tremendous help to us in implementing and shaping and updating the Save Our Lagoon plan. We'll have initial data from that the end of August and final documents in September, so that'll all be in time for our next update. The Sykes Inn Septic Sewer Project, we're at 60% design underway. South Central C Septic to Sewer design and engineering is just getting started. The utilities department staff, a number of them are here. They've been helping us move those projects along. The pollution sources and finding solutions spreadsheet that you all suggested, we've worked that up. We met with the District 2 Commissioner Barfield to get his suggestions on what he would like included in that. We're working on those revisions, so we'll hope to have that back to you next month. The MIMS muck dredging project, that continues underway, and FIT is collecting data to measure the performance of how that project is going. Sykes Creek muck dredging, we went out to bid. The site that was proposed was not accepted, was not a good site for the community, so we're working on designing a smaller Phase 1 project with Kiwanis Island, and we're continuing to work with Florida Inland Navigation District to use their site for the larger bulk of the project. Grand Canal muck dredging, we're finalizing those plans and specifications to go to bid. We expect to go to the board, the county commission, for permission to advertise and several other permissions that we need from them in August. The Mathers Bridge area muck dredging, we've expanded data collection because there was limited muck in the original area that we surveyed, and so we've expanded that project to capture more areas with muck. The Turkey Creek dredging, we had that experiment with the vacuum head. That data has, the grain size analysis has been done. We've now handed that off to Dr. John Treffery's lab to look at how, was there much flux reduction when we modified the grain size with that head. So we want to know not just the physical changes from that experiment, but the biological, the water quality ramifications. Muck finders, Sykes Creek has been probed, Mullet Creek is scheduled, and Milford Point, which is one of our septic to sewer areas, has been contracted. I know you all have been working with Brandon on your My Lagoon story videos. We're really looking forward to seeing those. It just continues to amaze me as I'm out in the public hearing how, people's stories and how they relate to the lagoon and how important the lagoon is to them. And so I think this is going to be a really good component to, why this lagoon is so important to our community and why you all are dedicating so much of your time to this effort to helping to clean it up. The story map, that also has to be ADA compliant, so we're trying to work through that wrench. The Day in the Life of the Lagoon event, we're going to have Missy Weiss come to your next meeting in August, so we're looking forward to hearing about that. We're working on a frequently asked question document for responding to social media posts, which are many and very diverse, and it'll help Brandon keep up with those if he's got a good FAQ reference. And then we're working, the next video was supposed to be on the Turkey Creek dredging and with relation to the Bayfront, the Palm Bay's Bayfront Stormwater Pond, but I really wanted that to be more like an anthem. It's one of the great areas where we're cleaning. We know this is a reduce, remove, restore, respond plan, and so you can't just do one thing. It takes all of this stuff together. So we've got our dredging there at the mouth of Turkey Creek. We've got a living shoreline proposed on that bayfront. There's a stormwater pond between the railroad tracks, or right next to the railroad tracks, and then as you work your way up through the Turkey Creek system and the Melbourne-Tillman Canal system, we have the wastewater treatment plant, reclaimed water upgrades. We have thousands of septic to sewer, septic upgrades planned in that watershed, and we've been working with Melbourne-Tillman and the Water Management District on rediversion projects to take millions of gallons that had been ditched and drained towards the Indian River Lagoon that are supposed to flow historically to the St. Johns River to pump that water back west. And so stage 2 of that project is completed and underway, and for 2018, nearly 60% of the water in the Melbourne-Tillman system has been pumped back west. And so when you look at the entire watershed and all those projects collectively reducing loading coming down the creek and then cleaning up that accumulated load at the bottom of the creek, I think it has an opportunity to tell a much bigger story than this one project at a time, which people wonder how that's ever going to add up to enough. So it's taking us longer to get that one done, but hopefully it's going to tell the story that we wanted to tell.
Isn't it also a story of cooperation amongst government bodies?
Yes, so many
That needs to be
entities
part of the
involved.
tale.
Absolutely. So meetings this month, the Biosolid Symposium, I sent the links to that. There's a lot of very interesting information coming out of that, and there are a number of people in the community up and down the lagoon motivated to try to take some next steps on that. And so looking forward to working with the regional planning councils to see what we can come up with. It doesn't seem like quite as urgent a matter for Brevard's portion of the Indian River Lagoon, but certainly for our St. Johns River to the west and for our partners at the southern part of the lagoon, biosolids are a significant issue. And working with the state on how they are tracking this issue, because where those biosolids are going now could potentially change and become an issue for our part of the lagoon, and we wouldn't want that. So something we're keeping an eye on. We've had several pre-sewer community meetings in areas where we're working on these septic sewer conversions, South Central C and the Indian River Isles area, working with Lorraine Koss with Coco J and K, and the West Melbourne Sylvan Drive septic sewer project. And then I was asked to do an interview with Isadora Rangel at Florida Today on progress with the plan. I had a thought, in the middle of the night of something else that happened here that I've forgotten. Oh, it was the day that your meeting would have been had you met in June, we were at Florida Stormwater Association Conference presenting the groundwater pollution study and, getting input from folks on that. So that one's missing from your packet.
Virginia, this is Charlie over here. The comments that you're getting from the community, in general, can you kind of summarize them? And are there things we're doing really well or things they think we're not doing that we could do better?
For groundwater monitoring?
Well, no, when you said with the community meetings relative to the septic to sewer and some of the other projects, I'm just kind of curious if you're getting some feedback from the community. And
Well, a lot of people are very excited about it. Some people are concerned about what it's going to cost them. Folks who have maybe not had significant septic expenses and are concerned about the monthly expense of a sewer bill. So, we're working through those issues, and we're trying to provide them with average cost comparisons so that they have more to go on than, their personal experience. And it's good in those community meetings to have that diverse perspective shared so that people hear what their neighbors think.
Right, and at least in Cocoa, the meeting we had in Cocoa, I think there are a lot of questions about the plan overall and misconceptions that we were able to clear up. So even though we're a couple of years out, that was a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people don't know the basics of what we're trying to do. So, we tend to cycle in the same circle of people who are very informed, and there are a lot of people who aren't. So this is a good opportunity to get to more people, a wider audience. Upcoming forums and public events, we have MRC has a Mangrove Day celebration coming next week. Their report card is also due to be released August 7th. The Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program has their annual photo contest for their calendar. That's a very hot item, as we've heard from Dwayne and Kathy in the past. And there's a lionfish summit coming up in October in Cocoa Beach, so opportunities for people to get involved. Also, volunteer opportunities. We are working with Marine Resources Council to host a rain barrel workshop tomorrow. The zoo is hosting oyster gardening workshops for anybody who wants to become an oyster gardener and grow oysters next season to help with lagoon restoration. There's also an Adopt a Mangrove program. We just had Keep Brevard Beautiful, had a kayak cleanup in Turkey Creek last weekend. They've got the Kelly Park shoreline cleanup coming up next week. And then there are plenty of other ways to get involved with those programs. Under future topics, I know Danielle Bowden, you had asked about the circulation study. So I've spoken with Dwayne DeFries and Dr. Gary Zarillo, and Gary's got a couple more model runs to do. When I spoke to him about a week and a half ago, he'd done 8 out of 10 runs. So we expect to have that on your agenda for the next meeting, along with Missy Weiss to talk about a day in the life. And then hopefully Dwayne can also update us on some other things they've got going on, building a website on engaging emerging technologies. So that's what we have planned for you for August. And I've already reached out to potential September presenters as well. We have some lagoon sediment toxicology work going on right now. The data collection has been done, the analysis is underway, and I'm hoping that they'll be far enough along in the analysis to have some good information to share with us in September. So that's these reports, and then you have, I'm going to ask Brandon to sort of walk you through the big table. So quite some time ago, you had requested a way to sort of track progress, at a glance.
Yeah, so we broke down the table by the entities, so you'll see Brevard County listed first and then all the various entities.
In
So,
alphabetical.
yeah, they're all in alphabetical order, so it wasn't that we put the county first, just because. And all the project names are there, and as well as the project types, because you might not know what it is just by the name, and we tried to group them by the types that they are, so you see the stormwater together, the muck projects all together, septic removal. And of course, once we get the plan approved, we send out a notification that they're ready to move forward. Now, once that happens, we have to wait on a scope of work coming from those entities to start these projects. And for some of these projects, especially with many of the cities, even though we give them the notice in April, a lot of times they're not slated to begin till their next fiscal year, because they may have money that they budgeted for that project to start then, or they're waiting to receive some grants. So you'll see areas that are highlighted in yellow that say expected year one. So these are projects we haven't received a scope of work on yet, but we expect to get that sometime this year, and I'm guessing a flood of them will probably come in October. And the ones that we have contracted, received the scope of work, you'll see the progress of those contracts. So once we prepare the contract and get it executed by the county, it's then sent to the grantee, and they have to approve it and send it back. Now, sometimes that's just a signature of one person, or it might have to go before their council, depending on the complexity of the contract. So if the council has to review it, sometimes it's another month before we get that back to us. But then once it's executed, we will track that, and so we have the reimbursement on there if they've requested any reimbursement yet, and then column for the project completed as well.
Brandon, does the color on the scheme, it says yellow and red and blue, can you just provide the definitions?
Yeah, so the green, that's just, we are making progress. That's where we are with that project. The yellow, I'd use just as the expected for year one. It's one of those, just to bring attention that it's coming up. Any of the red, those were ones that we expected in year zero. So you'll see there's only a few on there that are in red, and we've been in communication with those entities on why, and there's, just some permitting planning processes that are holding them up. And so we're waiting for those to be resolved, and then they can move forward with those projects. And then you also have a blue color on there, and those were used for anything that is expected to happen beyond the current year. So some of the projects, you'll notice we've broken down, at least on the county side, the engineering and construction. We don't necessarily know from the city side where they are in those steps, but on the county one, we can keep track of that a lot more closely, so we added those in, and that way we can track the progress of the contracts within the engineering side, and then some of those, even though we have made it through most of the engineering section, the project itself isn't going to start for year two, so we've noted that in blue, the construction part of the project.
Brandon, could I recommend maybe, we do have expected year 0, year 1, and year 2. Maybe we actually put the fiscal or calendar year that it is, just because I'd have to go back and remember what exact date year 0 was.
Okay.
So maybe we add that somewhere in there.
Okay.
Couple things. One, I think it's marvelous. It has to be online and kept up to date there, and I think it'd probably be useful for us to see this as part of our monthly reports. The one emendation I would make is on the bottom of the last page. I would suggest you may want to put a body count for each of the columns, and say, how many have grant confirmations, how many, et cetera,
Okay.
and perhaps do that for current month and previous month so we can see progress. For those such as scope of work received, you may want to split that out into expected and received and so on. So we get some sort of macro gross tally of where we stand. But if I'm the guy that's been asking for this, I got it. I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, Brandon, thank you. First off, this, for me, looking at the green lines, I can, big picture, quickly see the progress that is being made. And I'm sure all of us frequently hear from our friends, neighbors, acquaintances, you guys have all this money, what are you doing? Particularly since I live near the Banana River, and disgusting is the nicest word I can use. So I think this is actually a great tool. I hope it's up on the website. I'm taking this home. It'll be in my car. And I can at least show people that we are making steps. It is distressing that there's very few things accomplished, but at least we are making steps. So thank you very much.
And I would also suggest that this be a monthly mail out to the entities who are in the left-hand column receiving funds. And I would gently suggest to any of them that are seeing this that yellow is not a good color. The ball's in your court, and the suggestion is get off your burro and start spending this money. The sooner we can spend the money, the sooner we fix the lagoon. And the county has done its part.
Thank you. I think, one of the hard things for people to understand is a lot of these projects are very challenging, and they have long lead times with easement acquisition and design and permitting, and so there isn't a lot of turn dirt stuff going on for people to see, but the county and all of our municipal and nonprofit partners are working hard to get those projects ready to turn dirt.
I just wanted to echo that I think this is great to put on the web, so when I'm on Facebook and I hear you're not doing anything, we can attach that, because it's obvious that it's actually incredible how much is being done right now.
Right.
And also, even like, for example, our stormwater pond, even though it's not being funded by the lagoon tax, it's under construction right now, but that conception started 3.5 years ago. So we have land acquisition. We're on grantors' timelines. So if you're getting a grant, like a 319 grant or anything from the state or federal government, you're on their time. So that takes at least 1.5 years to get those things settled. And then you're undergoing engineering and permitting after that, and then you finally go through a 6-month bid process and contracting process. So it does take time. It takes years. All of these things take years to start. So we need to make sure that when we're out in the community that we make sure people understand that this is not, turn dirt time after 6 months. That doesn't happen.
And that document that we gave to John to review, that timeline gives that breakdown to how many months do each of these steps take.
Yeah.
And so we'll have a more clear picture of that once we release that out too.
Perhaps that might be a boilerplate attachment to this. And the other recommendation, this is a good thing. You might want to email it to Jim Waymer, Bob Gabordi, and before your tour on television to Isadora Rangel, so that they understand what the ground truth is as far as the work going on here.
Getting their help, I agree. Getting their help and explaining that in their articles and their, when they do their, media stuff, that's an important aspect that we need to get across to people. Because I think it's also, people need to understand that we don't really want to, this is affecting environment. So it needs to be scrutinized and engineered correctly and done correctly and, and permitted correctly. So yeah, we could rush, but, maybe sometimes that doesn't work out in the end when you're rushing and not doing it right. So.
I think it might be helpful to have how many phases there are, just like we're in Phase 2 land acquisition of the Kings Mill project. Just a number of how many phases total. Just to give a very easy indicator.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. So.
Okay, moving on. At your desks there, you should have a copy of the agenda report that went to the County Commission yesterday for their meeting coming up on Tuesday regarding changes to the tourist development tax budget plan. So what's been proposed by the Tourist Development Council is setting aside $1 million a year from the Beach Improvement and Maintenance Fund for the lagoon. You have the third page in talks about how those dollars would be allocated. So up to 10% could be used for a communication plan. And I've spoken with Eric Garvey about our need for a communication strategy, of professionally done communication strategy. And so they're excited about working with us on that. There is no matching requirement for projects under 50,000, but for projects over 50,000, there would be a requirement of a 300% match, so 75% other money, 25% TDC money. And the idea there is to try to leverage state and federal cost share. These dollars in this beach improvement fund have historically done an incredible job at leveraging state and federal money, and so the TDC wanted to make sure that their dollars were still being leveraged strongly for the community. Near the bottom of that third page in, there's a list of projects that sort of meet the objectives sought out by the TDC. So shoreline and restoration projects with sustainable living shorelines, lagoon shoreline and causeway litter control, improve sustainable recreational access, supporting sport fishing and wildlife viewing through monitoring and habitat restoration, water quality testing for tourism promotion and special events, and public information and education. So I think those are really great activities that complement the lagoon plan very well. And so we're excited about potentially having this additional funding source available for the lagoon.
And we have no hand in the management of this whatsoever,
Correct.
As a
Correct.
oversight committee. Very good.
A couple of questions. First off, I appreciate any money from anywhere. Can somebody remind me how much of the ad valorem taxes that we are collecting each year are estimated to come from out-of-county visitors? It's in excess of 10 million, isn't it?
Well, not ad valorem,
Sales tax.
but sales tax, it was about, 28%, so about 10 million.
Right, so we're already taxing our visitors pretty heavily on this, okay? And while I appreciate an extra $1 million out of a $400 million budget or something, the TDC are the same people who 2 years ago sat in this room in front of the Board of County Commissioners following the fish kill, when all of us, and I would include everybody probably in this room, were asking our county commissioners to go to the governor and declare an emergency. And the TDC stood here and basically stopped that from happening. So I appreciate their money, but it looks like a PR event more than anything else to me.
I'll take it. I really didn't see it that way. I think there was a big concern with requesting a state of emergency among a lot of government officials because of the amount of funds that we were getting from our dredging from the state. And not being in jeopardy with that request. So I didn't see that way. I think a lot of the TDC members were concerned with watering down the original use of a tax that was voted on by the residents of the county in a referendum that has a very specific use that's related to tourism. So that was their concern. The statute allowed, that was just changed, the bill, that allowed the opening up of these funds is the reason why they're able to do this now. And the TDC discussed well before that, even that bill, on how they could look at using TDC dollars to help the lagoon. And they did that at numerous meetings, and which I was at. So there was never, in my opinion, a effort on behalf of the TDC not to use TDC funds. I think they were very much concerned, though, with using funds against the intent of the statute.
No, and I appreciate the legislation, and I appreciate the additional money. That's not my position. My position is that it's more public relations than it is actual impact on things. And we keep taxing the tourists when they're not the ones that cause the problem. So.
The next piece of paper in your packet is an updated, a proposed schedule for how we attack the 2019 update of the plan. So when I sat down to make a schedule for how we would do this, suddenly it's here already. We need to get started. So a number of the cities had said that it would be very helpful to them and to moving projects forward if we could get our decision-making done earlier so that in the February, March, April timeframe, when St. John's grants, DEP grants, EPA 319 grants, when those applications are all due, they know whether they have our dollars, our Lagoon dollars, as part of the matching funds to go after those grants. So starting with that in mind, trying to get us done before February. We worked backwards through the schedule of everything that needs to happen. One of the first things is that we want to go through the actual costs and available cost estimates for projects. You know, the plan was built on literature-based costs and what was available at the time. We're reaching out to all of our partners to get better cost estimates and use those to revise what the eligibility ought to be for projects in the plan. We plan to bring that back to you at your August meeting and then take that to the county commission for their blessing before we advertise to the community what the eligibility amount would be per pound of nitrogen removed for projects in the next round of plan update. Then I know we also did our best to avoid holidays despite the fact of trying to amend projects in the middle of the holiday, so that continues to be a challenge. I've allocated 3 weeks for staff to review all of the incoming proposals. One of those weeks includes Thanksgiving. So we know that if we have questions about applications, we may have a hard time getting hold of those partners to get those questions answered. So I felt like we needed 3 weeks. We also have 3 weeks for you all to review all of those packets before your meeting that's just before Christmas. So if, I know 12/21, that's really close to Christmas. So if that doesn't work for you all and you don't want to have that meeting on December 21st, we need to know that soon so we can adjust our plans some which way. And then we would go quickly to getting the draft plan updated with all of those changes, as well as a running list of other things that have come up over the year. As they do, we'll be bringing you that running list of changes that we plan to incorporate into a proposed draft plan revision. We're bringing you that list in August. Obviously, we can continue to add things, but we've already got a pretty hefty list to share with you. And so then we could get that plan through your January meeting and county commission approval right at the end of January.
The fact that you've got, the revisions are going to be done on November 30th, would it be possible to move our meeting date up by a week?
Yes.
And then that way it wouldn't be so close to the Christmas holiday, but it would also prevent us from getting behind schedule.
Okay, our challenge will be a meeting room, but we will jump right on that, and we'll let you know what we can sort out. We may have to go off campus, we may not be able to televise, I don't know, but we'll see what we can.
And then we
That's
just
agreed.
have
2 weeks rather than 3 weeks to review. So, good stuff, my personal schedule.
If it could, this is something I was going to bring up under last item on the agenda, but it seems appropriate here. And I've written down my thoughts so that they're less than usual. It will require at least a consensus from the committee to go forward. But the primary duty of this committee is to each year recommend to the Board of County Commissioners changes and adjustments to the Lagoon project plan that our oversight leads us to believe are useful. They'll be coming up again at the start of the year, and that's what this this paper talks to. We've heard detailed presentations on a wide range of lagoon topics from experts in interests of every kind. These have been very useful. But now entering our third year, I think it might be time to step back and also take a macroeconomic look at the broad categories of funding in the Lagoon project plan, considering not only the detailed projects themselves, but also the question of funding balance against the main areas of trust fund spending, and also the question of what areas of effort, if any, aren't in the plan that should be. And to this end, I suggest that staff, probably washed in as part of this, I suggest that staff undertake a study of funding balance and a potential effort not now funded and come back to us with their recommendations at a future meeting prior to us taking up consideration of possible adjustments to next year's Lagoon project plan. And the format of the staff response to be of the staff's choosing. I really think we need to have a broad step back. This is our third year. A broad step back look of are we balanced right between cleaning, getting the bad stuff out, keeping the bad stuff out, and changing hearts and minds in the community, et cetera. And also, are there things, and they have come up, things that aren't in the plan that ought to be. I think it's an area of consideration. I'm not talking about a deep study, but in addition to tinkering around with individual projects, there is a broad economic, macroeconomic question of, do we have the proper balance? Are we missing anything? And I would welcome the thoughts of the committee as to whether this is a useful thing to put on the staff.
Hey, John, I guess I would offer, will we have enough data within these first 2 years to make those good decisions? I mean, we might be able to make some changes around the edges. I'm not sure we could make, bigger changes. It's certainly worth looking. We need more data. But I think your idea has a lot of merit. But I'm just a little cautious whether we'll have enough information to go, roll forward with that. I kind of coupled with that, too. I was kind of curious. I believe, and maybe this is another new business item, is that our terms, I believe, are expiring aren't they, after 2 years? And so, we got to make sure, who is going to be looking at this in 2 years and what that process for either renewal or new people coming on board. I just like to keep that in everybody's mind.
So your terms renew unless you step down.
Okay.
But yes, that renewal is February or March. I'd have to check the bylaws.
February.
Yeah.
I think John's idea is a valid one, and I think Charlie's too is maybe we don't have enough data, but I'll probably take maybe 1 or 2 times to figure out what is the right format and what is the correct thing to capture. So I think we should take a shot at it, and maybe it's something we look at implementing every 3 years into the plan, or some way where we set it up that we continuously do this, and that way we can have a broader view, as John suggested, over everything.
I also support John's idea. We get very much into the minutia, and to step back and go, let's look at a big picture, and are we on track, and how can we modify, whether we have exactly the data or just kind of the conversations and discussions and feedback that we've received. So I think it's a very good idea, John. Thank you.
All right. Yes.
Yeah, and John, I appreciate the idea too. And you're suggesting that staff take a look at this and give us their feedback, but that suggests they haven't been looking at that all along. And my thought is that they have been looking at it all along. They're giving us their best recommendations when they give us the plans. If we want something else, we have to tell them what it is we want. And so, I want to make sure that people don't realize, I'm concerned that people will think that by that suggestion, staff is not doing this already. They are already doing this. And that's why I think the plan comes forth every year with their best recommendations. They wouldn't give us the poorest recommendations. Would you?
No, maybe this got ran by a little fast. I thought that your intent, John, was to bring in some outside expertise.
Perhaps, yes. And there is some. Cold eyes, people that may have PhD behind their name or other reasons for having communication to us to look at the question I said. Is the broad balance right? And is there something we ought to be doing? We essentially tripled the amount of money in communications and education. That was something we initiated here. I was in a conversation last week with a gentleman who's in the back of the room and another PhD and mayor of a Lagoon city and a fellow who rides herd with a doctorate on a wide range of scientists studying marine issues, including stuff in the lagoon. And they beat the crap out of me. We got to get the word out. We've got to change hearts and minds. So that may be one area in which we've cranked in 3 times as much money. Maybe the thought is it ought to be more. And you may hear outside people who care a lot about the lagoon who tell us that. So anyway, you have my thoughts on it. My suggestion is you figure out how to answer it. It may even be that the scope of work ahead of us, just to get this thing executed, means that we'd have to make bandwidth trade-offs that we don't want to make. So fine, do it next spring. Do it after the budget's gone to bed. But I really think it's probably a question to Tetra Tech also. We're doing a ton of bottom-up management. Let's take a hard look at top-down oversight as well.
And Virginia, I remember, I don't know how long ago it was, we were going to ask some of the other estuary programs or some of the other successful waterway restorations if they could look at our plan and give us positive or negative feedback.
Right, and Walker got that assignment, and he started on it, and one of the first people he reached out to was Dr. Dwayne DeFries, and you'll recall that Dr. DeFries had just reviewed, or was in the process of reviewing all 27 National Estuary Plans, and he came and presented to you on all that. So I think we've done that outreach to other estuaries that have plans and gotten their feedback that, we appear to be in line. We're doing the kinds of things that they have found to be successful. So I guess maybe we're at the fine-tuning question, which is, yeah, we're doing the right things. There are always, a few other things that we might be able to add here and there, but are we allocating our resources in the best way for the Indian River Lagoon? And that's something that I think those other estuaries don't necessarily know the right balance for our system. That's where you look to the local experts. So we can think about how to bring those folks in. When you open the plan, right there near the front in the Roman numeral pages there's a whole page and a half of people who experts who worked with us on the initial plan. And so there are a lot of those folks that we would want to re-engage on making sure that as we make changes and add projects annually, that we keep the big picture allocation to the most important things.
Well, the other thing to say is the original project plan was based on $320 million. We're looking now at about $500 million. And there may be opportunities that were not visible in the more austere budgeting, things that were cut out of it in order to get the hardcore stuff. now that we've got a broader range of funds available, maybe we don't want more dredging, maybe we want something entirely different. So that's another element. And the last thing I'd say is I share with John, I think probably everybody up here, high praise and gratitude for Virginia's work, for your team's work, for the extraordinary job you've done to turn the trust fund intention into some really, really good stuff for the lagoon.
Thank you.
Hey, John, it occurs that maybe as we do this, we look at certain projects that can be more quickly implemented. Because a lot of the stuff that we're doing, when I look at this sheet, has years and years and years before it will be completed. That's just the nature of this. And it's challenging, certainly for me and maybe for others, as we talk to our neighbors. When you look at other restoration projects, Tampa, Chesapeake Bay, et cetera, they talk of success in terms of decades. And my neighbors don't think in terms of decades, they think of the green water in the backyard. And there may be some projects that, and it's hard to set that expectation, I understand, but there may be some projects that we can implement quicker, and we certainly do have the additional funding, though I'm not sure it's going to get as big. But so in that terms, I'd like to think about this also as we shift. Thanks, John.
That's a thought, pull-ahead projects. That may be something else to do. And we're, this is a learning experience. We're a self-managing work group. There's a whole bunch of science that's falling on us, and a lot of it is new science. And each of these meetings is a grand tutorial on something that most of us here never gave much thought to. I know more about septic tanks than I ever thought I wanted to. So, good stuff.
Thank you, Virginia, very much.
So the financial report, there are a lot more dollars there in the assigned column and the contracted column than previously. And the last page, those oyster and living shoreline projects, now that we have the contract template for those should all get contracted within the next month. And you have the graph of revenues, actual revenues compared to our updated projection and the state's projection. I'm pleased to see that the actuals are tracking very well with our updated projections. I wish we were hitting the state's projections, but we're not. So that does teach us to be conservative in our estimate, but we're doing extremely well.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. We are on to our special presentations for today. And I want to thank all of our participants for being here, for taking time out of your busy schedule to give us information and to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. I really loved hearing those updates. It shows the extreme amount of effort that's going on in Brevard County, and it's important, and it's good to hear. Mr. Byron, I think you touched on a number of issues about communication and getting the word out there, and that's definitely it's not lost on me, and we'll hit on that as well. So thank you. Let me introduce myself. I'm Aaron Watkins with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection Central District, and we're here to talk about sanitary sewer overflows, the importance of that to the department, and how we're addressing that and tackling that from a regulatory perspective. And it's so important that we have division folks from Tallahassee that came down, and I want to thank them. We have Ben Melnick, who's the Deputy Director of Water Resource Management, and also Borja Crane-Morris, who's the MPDS Program Stormwater Administrator. And they drove down to Tallahassee just to talk to you guys and get the word out, so to speak, as far as what the state's doing and how important it is to us. in reducing sanitary sewer overflows. We don't want to see them happen. We want a reduction in their occurrence, and we're working with stakeholders in order to make that a reality. Like I said, this is a statewide effort, and many stakeholders are involved in this issue and reducing the occurrence of sanitary sewer overflows. I'll probably refer to them as SSOs going forward, a little bit easier to say. But like I said, DEP districts, this is statewide. I know that we're talking about Brevard County and the Indian River Lagoon, but these guys and the districts and the division and the other agencies, this is a statewide issue that we're tackling from a statewide collaborative aspect, and it includes utilities and facilities. Elected officials are a key component in lawmaking and funding. Residents play a huge part in this, both on the communication side and also their impact to SSOs and how they affect utilities. And then obviously the science and the research that goes behind the data on what causes algae blooms and that sort of thing. So all of that plays a part, and we're here to talk about it. The DEP has a wide range of aspects that we hit on. We have groups that work on basin management action plans. We have grant funding for water quality projects. We have state parks, Florida Geological Service, Florida Coastal Office. I could go on, but we're one team, and that's the Department of Environmental Protection. And as part of that team, we're here to talk about the regulatory aspects of sanitary sewer overflows, our wastewater rules, and our efforts in doing that. We got, like I said, we got rules, permits associated with wastewater utilities, requirements that they must abide by and be in compliance with in order to reduce and minimize the occurrence of SSOs. We have an enforcement response for when an SSO occurs, how the department ensures compliance going forward and holds folks accountable. And we also have a whole lot of in the works, which Ben and Borja are going to talk about, our current and future actions. They've been burning the midnight oil, working on a number of initiatives and a number of outreach efforts. So it's going to be good to hear, and we'll be looking forward to that. With that, I'm going to kick off the rules portion to you guys.
Alrighty, guys. Good morning. I'm Borja Cranamorris, as Aaron mentioned. I'm over the NPDES Stormwater Program, but I was brought into this this work group initiative to kind of look at the SSO issues statewide and try to bring a different perspective and solutions from maybe the stormwater management side to these SSO issues. So let me say that, reviewing the rules, Florida does have well-established rules under Chapter 62604 of the Florida Administrative Code that prohibits the deliberate introduction of stormwater into the collection and transmission systems, requires reporting of SSOs, it prohibits cross connections, it requires that the collection and transmission system requirements and the equipment to be maintained as intended in the rule. It also requires copies of the records drawings and the O&M, which is the operation and maintenance manual, to be available by the O&M personnel and available upon DEP's inspections.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for inviting us down here. We're thrilled to be here. I'm Benjamin Melnick. I am, as Aaron said, the Deputy Director of the Division of Water Resource Management. And what you see in front of you is a beautiful artistic rendering with very meaningful drawings here. If you can decipher the images here, what we've got is a depiction of how a collection system works, and just an indication generally of what permitting operations are in effect. So the three pictographs there in the background, you've got what looks like a high-rise, potentially office building, an individual home, and a factory of some sort. Those all, as you can see, feed into the collection system. So their waste streams enter into a pipe system that pulls it all together, and that goes through the general circle area there, which might be difficult to read, but it says a pump station. And We utilize pump stations in our collection systems here in Florida because we don't have enough mountains to rely on gravity to set all of our wastewater treatment facilities at the base of a mountain and let the waste stream gently flow down. So the collection system brings it together. There is a note in front of the factory where it says pre-treatment, so that's just a recognition that certain types of industry may require pre-treatment before their waste stream is joined into the rest of the collection system. So the collection transmission system then flows to the wastewater treatment facility, and for all of what you see here in the lines, a construction permit is required. As far as an ongoing operation permit, the wastewater treatment facilities themselves do have an operation permit with permit conditions, and for modifications to the collection system, it's typically done under a general permit depending upon what actions are undertaken. And you'll see we've identified here the addition of a group of homes. That is what much of Florida sees, and what the rapid growth of Florida has brought is suburban development, groups of homes that are connected in what we refer to as a satellite system. That satellite system works similarly to the rest of the collection system where waste streams come together. What happens there is a satellite system. All those homes use piping that then feeds together, and then that ties into the collection system. As far as satellite systems go, we have a tremendous amount here in Florida, and many of them are privately owned, though they do hook up and work with the utilities. It does present unique situations with the combination of public and private entities tying together and working together. So to briefly cover spill reporting, there's several requirements for spill reporting. Those fall in Florida statute, in department rules, as well as in permitting conditions. Depending upon the volume of the spill, the spill has to be reported in potentially a number of places. The spill if there's a spill tied to the public notice of pollution, the Florida statute, it has to be reported within 24 hours to the state watch office. If there is an immediate threat to public health, or if it is in excess of 1,000 gallons, then that also is reported to the state watch office. Any spills or incidents that do occur must be reported to the district office if they don't meet those thresholds, and all of that is collected and analyzed at the district offices.
Yeah, so the purpose of this slide is really to talk a little bit about what the department is currently doing, so that later on in the presentation we can give you what the future is going to look like. So right now for the geoform, the spill data is actually reported to the state watch office and the DEP district offices, and then the department collects that information in what we call the geoform. So this allows the spill data to be used and tracked with a GIS system. The data then is exported to an Excel format, and this allows users to easily identify the spills within the 1 mile radius of the Department of Health beach and monitoring sites. And like I said, later on we'll talk a little bit more of how this process is going to change.
I know that Brevard County Utilities, Jim Helmer, Mark Regan have talked to the committee before on common causes of sanitary sewer overflows, but I wanted to hit on that again because it's going to tie into a lot of our efforts that we're doing as far as outreach and our regulatory actions. So common causes, equipment, break-in line, power, and rain resulting in flooding. I think the key there is the flooding issue. We get rain every day, but that doesn't always generate a sanitary sewer overflow. Most of the time, rain generated is related to flooding, where the stormwater management system and the water table's high enough to where it inundates the system beyond the normal aspects. So those are the main causes there. So more to the specific details from those previous bullets. Residential stormwater input is a big component And I think this is where it's important for us to outreach and communicate to residents their role. When the yard's flooded, when the street's flooded, opening a storm cleanout cap or lifting a manhole off puts a tremendous strain on the utility and can result in SSOs. Also, if you munch your cleanout cap with a lawnmower and destroy it, it's important to get that thing fixed because thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of gallons of water can go in there, particularly if your yard is flooded. There's system capacities, design, aging infrastructure, which I know that's a big component with utilities to upgrade and update their infrastructure and pipes. Also, in the pipes themselves, you have material buildup from fat and grease and sediments and all kinds of stuff that gets down the drain, and tree roots, settling and shifting of pipes. And then you have contractors, telecommunication company or someone putting in a sprinkler system. They debore, they directional drill bore, and they hit a force main, and you have a spill. So that occurs as well as a main component. Power failures are obviously a component when a lift station or a utility can't run the equipment to get the water from one place to another. Then that will obviously create an SSO or lead to a potential SSO. And we're going to get into operation and maintenance plans, and also the sanitary sewer overflow response plan, the SORP. Basically not implementing those, not getting out in front of those, which we'll get into further detail of. That's a big focus with the state as far as getting utilities and folks to understand the importance of those things, to both be proactive in preventing a spill from occurring, but then once one occurs, to be able to respond effectively and immediately to reduce the impact of that spill. The other mechanism that we have under the regulatory arm is to do enforcement and response. Basically, when a spill happens, what do we do to ensure compliance, to prevent that spill from occurring again, hold a individual accountable for noncompliance. And I think it's really important to note, and I'm going to go through these bullets, that A, it's not done in a vacuum. We communicate with our division, we communicate with other districts, all the districts communicate together, and that's done regularly. So our decisions on our enforcement and response, it's not done in a vacuum at all. And we look at things such as noncompliance history. How often are SSOs occurring? Why are they occurring? Are they negligence? Is there something deliberate done? Obviously, those would lead us down one path of enforcement options. Or is the utility exercising good faith and responding appropriately and has done a number of initiatives to prevent SSOs from occurring? So we look at that noncompliance history and the causes. We look at spill characteristics. So I think it's important in our communication to differentiate between the type of SSOs that occur. You have treated effluent, partially treated effluent. You have effluent that meets reclaim standards that just didn't get to, the irrigated lawn. It might have spilt somewhere else upstream. That's different than a raw spill, or in the event of a large storm, a raw spill that has a large component of stormwater associated with it. We look at the size of the spill, 5 gallons versus millions of gallons. Whether or not it goes to ground surface or surface water, we have a number of guidance material and documentation on assessing public health and harm, so basically the impact of that spill and what the environmental harm associated is with that, whether or not water quality violations are involved, response time and actions, which I touched on before. So all of that leads into a non-cookie cutter approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. All these details play a part in our response, and that can be warning letters, notice of violations, penalties, and consent orders.
So, among other things, our current department actions, we do undertake a high volume of wastewater facility inspections. As you can see, it's 1,700 plus a year. Our inspectors, as well as the district offices and the division, do work with utilities to ensure compliance with their O&M plan requirements, making sure that they have O&M plans in place. And then there's, of course, further work with utilities for essentially as many programs as we can and as much outreach as we can do to ensure the reduction of SSOs and the appropriate handling in the event of an SSO.
Yeah, so to add to what Ben was mentioning, one of the things we looked at is the capacity management operation manual that's commonly known as CMOM. It's a document that EPA has developed. It's over almost close to 200 pages long. So part of the work group initiative that we did is bringing experts from different backgrounds, working with the district offices and saying how can we make this document, how can we streamline this, how can we make this more robust, so that the facilities and the personnel at the facilities can understand what's expected of them, and when DEP comes to the site, we have an understanding of what's needed at the facility. So a couple things that we've done is we took the essential things out of the document.
Could you just tell us what CMOM stands for?
Capacity Management Operation Manual.
Okay.
And so we took the essential things and basically streamline it, and some of the things I wanted to highlight a little bit was the evaluation process for the managers at the facility with their personnel to make sure they're properly trained, they understand their job duties, record keeping, the information of the actual facility system and how it operates, the evaluation of the field work, the site itself, and then within the document is sort of a Q&A checklist format that helps guide personnel asking certain critical questions to the facility so that they can make sure they're in compliant with that.
Let's go back to the outreach aspect. I think it's important as we talk about engaging our stakeholders. One thing that the department's doing is we're facilitating a utility information exchange where we basically bring the utility directors for all the major utilities in the district together quarterly to basically talk shop and share lessons learned, particularly after a big storm like Irma. What went right, what went wrong, let them learn from each other. It gives us an opportunity to talk about any new regulations or rules or where the focus or priority of the department is. So I think that's a big, it's an important thing that I think the department's facilitating is bringing all of those utilities together and having a safe place for them to talk shop and learn from one another.
And that dovetails into our future actions with those district areas where we're doing utility information exchanges. The department does do our best to take ideas that we hear from one district and make sure that they're shared in other districts. If it's something simple that's good information that really, if it had been widely disseminated, it's something that it seems like common sense. Something we ran into in one of the districts was everybody may have generators in place for their various aspects of the collection system, for perhaps a pump station which requires electricity to function because we don't have the downhill gravity to run these systems. And keep in mind that even though our artist's rendition there was quite small and fit on one page, we're talking about hundreds of miles of piping. In large utilities, we might even be talking about thousands of miles of piping. So electricity is an important factor here. So in storm events, one of the things we heard from one of our districts was one of the utilities was regularly testing all of their generators, and then because of the actual impact of the storm and how long the area was without power, those generators that were tested regularly and checked off for maintenance began to fail 3 and 4 days into constant running. And they were unable to cycle the generators on and off because of the stormwater inundation, that the system was just overloaded with capacity. So those which seem like simple things that most people would have thought of was not widely in operation around the state. Most people were doing adequate maintenance, adequate operation on their generators and running them on a regular basis to make sure that they function, keeping them well supplied without putting them through the if you will, the the capacity test and having them run for days on end to see if the generator itself would function through that. So some of our future actions are bringing those what you might call simple solutions or what you might call common sense solutions, and just offering those to other utilities to see if there's room for them to be worked into their operations. Did you want to?
Yeah. So again, part of the work group initiative was to evaluate all things internally and externally as to what we can do, whether it's to modify something or to develop something brand new. And so earlier I mentioned I touched base on the geoform, and that's kind of an old way to manually track the information. So working with IT, we're developing this this business portal, online business portal, where the facilities can directly enter the data, the spill data, into the system to give them real-time information. They can plot it on a sort of a map direct to pinpoint exactly where these spills are at. The system will also help to automate the notification to DOH when there is a spill within that 1 mile radius. It will also assist in automating the information to the public notification pollutant process as well. So the idea is that it's a one-stop shop where we can get all the information that's going to be universal and beneficial to not only the facilities but also for the department. And the other thing that I'm really happy about is that we looked at our SSO inspection checklists, and so when we went into revising those checklists, we considered what the facility needs as well. So the development of the checklist serves two purposes: one for the facility and one for the DEP inspectors. So when we go out there to inspect the facilities, they already have an idea of what DEP expects. So they already have a copy of the inspection report that should be filled out when we go out there, in addition to additional questions or information we may require at the time. The other targeted audience we looked at is residents, and so we have developed a bunch of brochures to SSOs for the residents to help them identify the issue, how to report the issue, and what they can do as a homeowner to help prevent these issues from happening. So that has been developed, and we're looking forward to getting that information, those brochures, out to the public. Rule revisions, I spoke earlier about the rules. I believe we have well-established rules in place, but everything is on the table. So we will continue to evaluate our rules, to strengthen our rules when as needed.
Just to touch on the guidance on O&M and the SORP development, some of that was sort of what I was talking about, with sharing some ideas to see if utilities do want to work those in or can work those in. And then some of the SSO response plans that we've seen, they're robust, they're great in coverage, they're applied very well, and then the unexpected occurs, and there's a scramble of what happens. And so some things that the department has worked with some utilities, particularly smaller utilities that don't have as much resources to just react to an evolving situation, plan ahead how to adjust in the face of an emergency in case the plan itself goes awry. What's the backup plan? That sort of thing.
Good deal. So basically, in closing, I think it's important to go back to that very first slide and look at those stakeholders and realize that this is an important issue to not only the department but each one of these stakeholders. And Mr. Byron, you had me thinking as I was scratching notes, listening early. I missed a bullet there. I would put media as well as a big stakeholder and someone that we need to continue to communicate with. As well. So with that, I want to thank Ben and Borja for coming down and meeting with you guys, and we're more than happy to answer what questions we can with you. I'll tell you right now, I won't know the answer to everything, and if I don't, we'll find out the answer for you and get it to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, John?
If I could, and you may not want to answer this, but I assume the bar is in the central district, Mr. Moore?
Correct.
And there are a number of utility systems in the world, municipal, county, and so on. And so the question is first of all, how good is the quality of our infrastructure? And its capacity is part of that question as well. The second is, how well does Brevard do as far as normal maintenance and normal operations? And the third, how would you assess our performance on casualty operations? We just had a final exam last fall.
Right. Great question. I think that SSO data, that geoform, if we could navigate to it, we could chart out exactly how many SSOs have occurred with any utility in any district in any county and compare that. I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that Brevard County has invested a lot in its infrastructure. I know that we had spills statewide across the state, and they were not an anomaly. I think every district across the state was affected by Irma and had SSOs. There wasn't one county or district or counties probably, but district-wide that occurred. So I think that's the significance of the statewide importance of this. And as far as how Brevard County is doing, I would leave it to, I think Jim will give the update exactly what they're doing. I know that they've invested a lot of effort and energy and a lot of man hours in preventing SSOs. And I do commend them for their response during Irma. They had staff working around the clock. I don't know how many vac trucks, a lot, and their response was clear that it was important to them, and they should be commended for that effort and to stop that spill.
Aaron, I had a few questions.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm over here, but that's all right, man. Don't worry. Don't worry. Either way works. Either way. I had 3 questions. The first one was dealing with the outreach, and it's something that I have learned recently, or maybe a couple months ago, is that how much nitrogen is in reclaimed water, or how many nutrients are in reclaimed water. And while it's a good thing to be able to reuse our water, I think unless that is expressed to the public, that they need to not only, reclaimed water is good, but they need to make sure that it's not running down into the streets, into the stormwater system, because that, I think the presentation Mark gave about the water that went into the lagoon after Irma, the reclaimed water was actually, had more nutrients than the water that was going into the lagoon due to the SSO. So I didn't know if FDEP had any outreach or any materials that they're giving out either to the municipal CTS systems or just statewide themselves as to the, I don't want danger or the proper use of reclaimed water.
Right, and I think that goes to the whole issue of water use, water conservation, and also proper use of that water. I'll look. I know that my teammates in the watershed section that work on BMAPs and TMDLs look at that, and I'll check with them on what the outreach effort is, but I definitely, that is a good point as far as proper water use and making sure that that just doesn't go down a gutter into the storm drain that the Borja is familiar with the MS4s, that could have an effect. So.
And in the Division of Water Resource Management, we do have a reuse coordinator, and one of the roles of that position is to look at what reuse is in place statewide, what capacity is in place, but then also what's the actual reuse that's being used, and then how is that being managed, and making sure that BMPs or best management practices are in place whenever possible, and making sure that the reuse is in a proper role, like you said, to reduce potential impacts. And then that is obviously an ongoing analysis, and that's sort of, forgive the pun, but a fluid reaction and an analysis state where we're looking at how the reuse is used. But Florida is a nationwide leader in reuse, both in capacity and in actual use. And so to some extent, we encounter situations that others haven't before, and so we have to react and adjust going forward as planned.
And your point's well taken, and I'll follow up that specifically addressing outreach to residents on what's involved with reuse,
right,
and good use of the reuse, I think is important. So I made a note here, and we'll look into that.
Okay, thank you.
What is the website that people can go to see that map?
The SSO.
The online business portal?
The geoform.
The geoform is an internal document.
And it's on
but it's on
Water Gateway website.
We can get it for you.
Yes.
Yeah, we can provide you the link.
Yes.
I was just thinking that if the public has access to something like that, that might be great to let them know.
Absolutely. Yeah, the more we can provide the public information on that, and though we obviously don't know the exact location, and we didn't provide it in the presentation, we can follow up with you guys and make sure that that's provided.
Okay. Vinny kind of triggered me off. Is there a state limit on the parts per million allowed in reclaimed water of nitrogen? Is there a law that says there cannot be more than X number per parts per million of nitrogen in reclaimed water?
Yeah, yes, we treat to the standards, and that's predicated on basin management action plans and in the permit limits themselves with the utility. So those limits can be different from watershed or utility to utility. So what the limit is off the top of my head for nitrogen, I don't know. Jim, you got your permit with you?
Well, I think,
But it would be different depending on where you are in the state.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, cool. You guys do a lot of stuff. DEP does a lot of stuff, thanks. I've been in your parks recently. And the collection of SSO in and of itself is a tremendous amount of information and the simple data analysis. So kind of big question first, maybe you can answer. Per capita, or compare Brevard County versus 66 other counties, is our SSO count higher, lower, average for the rest of the state versus the rest of the state?
I didn't come with that data, but we have that data, and we can provide it and crunch that number.
Could I request that you get that information to staff?
Sure.
Secondly, in the analysis of Brevard's SSOs, you said that the primary 4 causes are equipment, break-in-line, power, and flooding. Can you give us a breakdown for Brevard County, and I don't just mean the county, but all the municipalities included, of what percentage of those 4 causes are?
Yes.
So what's causing our SSOs?
Right, yes, we have that data charts. It wasn't in the presentation. They're going to.
And I appreciate the overview,
Yeah.
but I want to get right down what's causing the problem here,
Yes.
and are we doing worse or better than other people? And obviously, the next group will talk about our solutions.
Yeah, and very good questions, and that data is available, and those numbers have been crunched. I don't have them at my fingertips. I apologize for that, but I will get those to staff. They're reviewing some data right now. And
Mr. Craner-Morris here was, he had tried to prepare as best he could for what questions might be asked, and he has some district generalized numbers, so it doesn't go directly to your question, sir. We can get that information for you, but just from the numbers that he did bring along with him, Central District as a whole is not an outlier. It's very average in its spills per year and per capita, but of course that I don't have how that shakes out amongst the Central District counties.
And statewide, so you want specific for Brevard, but statewide, we know that line breaks, there were, out of all the spills that occurred, there were about 1,300. There were about 1,300 equipment malfunctions, about 1,000 power.
Just for context for these numbers, this is the last approximately 3.5 years of data.
So yeah, the best thing to do rather than just throw numbers out, you know the dates and the time frames and the data pool, we're more than happy. We'll provide you that data, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to ask you for it right now, and much less specific, but if you can get this information to staff, and then staff can compile it to represent to this group at some point in the future, I think it would be useful for us to keep all of this in perspective.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's a great point, and we'd be happy to.
I'd like to add into that. I fully support the data, and I think it's worth looking at, but I think we've got to be cautious too because of the time horizons of some of this information. So we look at the data over the last year, or the last 3 years, and it's going to look a lot different than if we take that same data set and move it 5 years back in history, because day-to-day utilities are dealing with a lot of different challenges, and I think you'll find that certain utilities are going to have grease issues when they've got more tourism and restaurants and different makeup of what their residential areas look like. You'll see summer thunderstorms that knock out power. But then when we have a hurricane event like we did, then all of a sudden you're going to see more flooding issues. So we've got to make sure that we use a degree of caution in how we look at that and some of the variability that occurs. And also, make sure that we look at this in the context of everything that goes on in our community as well. We can stop SSOs. We can make them zero. Utility bills may be 20 times what they are today. Your stormwater infrastructure may be hundreds of times what it is today because a utility is not designed to handle the massive quantities of rainfall that happens when we have streets that are designed to only handle a 10 or 20-year storm, and we have 100-year storms. And the power systems that the utilities are relying on that go out for a week. And are we prepared to bury every power system around all of the community and the cost that's associated with that? And one of the challenges a lot of utilities face is affordability. People need water every day. They need this sewage treatment every day. And we as well as everyone have low income areas. And there's a challenge of making sure that every day that utility is affordable and workable too. So I want to caution us as we walk through this it's real easy to come off of a massive event like Irma, and it's a great learning event for understanding the extreme conditions that we can face. But it's been almost 15 years since we had a similar type event, and we've had 15 years of operating and people paying bills every day and having to deal with what happens every day, and we do have to manage that financial aspect and all of there's so many threads that connect into this, and I just encourage everyone to really look at that as we have some of these discussions as well.
And I was going to ask also if it was possible for actually the Irma event, if you could note what the primary sources were. Was it infrastructure or was it flooding?
Our primary sources in the Central District were flood-related. Other districts was power, but in the Central District in Brevard, it was water.
Okay.
I was going to add too, and kind of add to your question, Stephanie, is that the magnitude of the different SSOs. I mean, you may have 2,000 line breaks, but maybe one event that equaled that or was greater.
Absolutely.
So that where you kind of focus, maybe where you want to direct your studies and your fund. And the thing too, I think we need to look at are the black swan events like we had with Irma. The things you don't really expect. And kind of make sure that we can respond to those type of black swans.
We have penalties for large dumps into the lagoon, correct?
Correct.
And what do those penalties cost?
There's two forms of penalty assessment that get used. There's the ELRA penalty, the Environmental Litigation Reform Act, I believe, the attorney says. I'm right. That establishes specific criteria by statute for a spill. So if there's a spill and there's no water quality violation, it's $2,000 for the event. If there is a water quality violation, it could be $5,000. But then we also have the opportunity to use a penalty matrix where we factor in extent of deviation from the requirement. So basically, how far off from the compliance mark did the non-compliance occur, and then also factor in the environmental harm associated with that. So was it minor harm, moderate harm, or major harm? And those basically put you in bracket categories, anywhere from $500 to $12,000 per event. And then you also have a factor of multi-day penalty. So if a non-compliance occurs for multiple days, that can escalate a penalty. And then on the other side, you have good faith effort and an option for reduction of penalty. So it sounds complex, but we have a lot of good guidance put together for that, and that's available on our Office of General Counsel website to look at.
Well, I bring that up to go on Todd's point. all of this is going to cost money for public utilities. And so are we going to pay it in the penalty, or are we going to pay it in our infrastructure and making?
Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a great point when it comes to the penalty assessment. A penalty may be assessed, but we do have the ability to do an in-kind penalty offset. So rather than utility just write a check and send it to the department, we would like to see that money used for specifically addressing the issue, an in-kind penalty project offset. So I know correct, and I know that we did in-kind penalty offset for Brevard County Utilities and their SSO and our enforcement action on them. That generally we would definitely want to see that money invested where it can fix the problem the most, and we have that opportunity to do if the factors line up in order for us to be able to do that. Yeah.
I'm sure you have a number of metrics. You've mentioned some of them, how many SSOs, you've talked in terms of gallons and bean count and line breaks and so on. The metric we care about most as far as our intention of the trust fund and Lagoon plan, as far as keeping bad stuff out of the river, is pounds and tons of nutrient.
Okay.
And I haven't heard you say that you quantify that, both in your routine operations and in your disaster responses. I think from the viewpoint of lagoon water quality, I mean, on one hand, we've got a pie chart that says that the sewer overflow is I think it's 0.1% of the total nutrient load. We got another thing that says it's close to 40% for non-point source, which is what a lot of your stuff is. It shows up and runs into the river. I would suggest that you give some thought to making pounds or tons of nutrient introduced to the aquifer, introduced to the surface water, introduced to, in our interest, the lagoon. And I'm sure this is of interest to every other body of water in the state. Pounds of nutrient, tons of nutrient, phosphorus and nitrogen is a very, very key part of this committee's responsibilities and oversight interests.
Absolutely, and I think the effluent quality goes hand in hand with that. So on our permitted side, so if everything works correctly and you have reclaimed water treatment or a discharge to a rapid infiltration basin or wherever that wastewater is going, we know those limits. They've got to report those limits, what those values are on how much nitrogen and phosphorus gets basically treated and disposed of. And I didn't mention underground injection, but when it comes to a spill, you have the effluent quality that could vary. So that's why it's important, and we try to work with facilities to go sample and get that data, because depending on how much stormwater is in that system, the concentrations of nutrients could vary greatly, and also the type of water it is. Was it partially treated? Did it hit a part of the treatment system and then spill afterwards? And all that factors in. I think there is a need for that, and the best thing that we can do to get that information is when a spill occurs, to get good sampling data by the utilities to give us what is the concentration of nitrogen in that spill water. And I know you had a little bit of data Brevard County did on their Irma spill that gave some concentrations of nitrogen. But the more data we have, the better. You can't really make decisions on one data point. You got to have more. So absolutely, your point's well taken, and I think that is there anything specific that we need to provide you for that?
But just simply say it's a key metric from the viewpoint of saving the river. And when we have storm events, if we have SSOs that are different from hurricanes, no-name storms, and so on.
So what I'll do is we'll write down the need to somehow come up with a quantification and work with our stakeholders. So in the future, when spills occur, how can we quantify what that nutrient loading impact is? I think that's a fair ask, and we can work with folks in getting that data.
Yep.
Good point.
I had one more question, Aaron, sorry. I've got your head spinning around. And by the way, Penn, puns are encouraged here, so please bring them on. Bring them on. I don't have any to share with you, or I would. But so you talked about, and this is kind of a broad overview because I don't follow the FDEP. I'm sorry, I don't have your guys' trading cards, but I would love to. But so you think about stuff like miles per gallon and how over time the trend line is to go higher and higher, right? We're trying to get more efficient with the use of gas. We're trying to cut down on carbon dioxide, whatever. So with you guys talked about getting groups together to talk about what they've learned from different events or best practices. And Todd talked about trying to make sure that that we're cost effective in everything we do. So when you bring these groups together, I had two questions. First off, are there local citizens from those areas involved in those meetings? Because that might give you another perspective, kind of like we are, introducing topics that might be another angle to look at. That was one part of it. I know I got sub-part of the questions. I'm so sorry. The second thing is there a challenge to those groups? Are they challenged because standards are getting stricter to get better? And I think that's how we improve, is by being challenged. So and that's why I brought up the miles per gallon historically. I don't know if the FDEP, if you guys, historically, if you look at your standards or your requirements, if they're getting stricter as time goes on. And if not, maybe I know it can get political and it can get crazy as far as those standards go, but maybe there's a challenge to that group to come together to say, can we do better, and how do we do better, or can we be more economic, and how do we get more economic, just so there's some sort of outcome out of those meetings. I think they're brilliant. I think it's great. I'm really happy that you guys are doing them. I just think sometimes if you push people, brilliance can happen. So,
absolutely, we don't have citizens in that. That's utility directors and staff with specific utilities.
Jim may say that he doesn't want citizens there, and I would understand. But
no, I think it's a good point. I think the more we can engage citizens and have residents understand and learn what actually is involved in flushing the toilet, to getting it treated, to a safe standard that's then back in the environment. The more we can do that, the better. Your other point related to pushing, a lot of what you were discussing, we have basin management action plans that limits are set and reviewed, and those do get reviewed and changed and challenged, facilities to hit the number, and I know that they're under review currently. And getting implemented currently. So when it comes to SSOs, we don't want to see any. That's the challenge that we are putting to the utilities, is eliminate all SSOs, and now let's talk about how we can do that, and those are the aspects that these gentlemen talked about. And we'll, you're more than, I'll invite you to the next meeting.
I'll be there, man.
Yeah.
I'll bring puns, Ben, I promise.
Perfect.
Donuts and puns.
Good.
I'll bring them.
Good.
I'd like to add to that, because I think there's, in general, I seldomly run across a utility that doesn't want to improve and operate better. The vast majority of utilities out there work for governments that are serving their constituents and trying to do a good job on it. There are numerous areas, all of the utilities do feel regulatory pressure, whether it's from DEP or certainly when EPA comes in, and looking for long-term trend lines of reductions in SSOs is absolutely part of what occurs. The other thing is there are many utility industry groups, the Water Environment Federation, there's the Florida Benchmarking Consortium, there's quite a few, and a lot of that focuses on collection of data so that people can compare themselves against others. It's hard because so many of the systems are unique to each community, and the same with the public involvement. It's hard to do public involvement on a very grand scale, because the operation of every utility is so unique to their own needs. And so it's absolutely something that's important, but I think that local piece is really important. The thing that a lot of utilities face, which is, we just had that discussion on muck removal and projects and showing quick results, is that Utility operation is a very, very long time horizon situation. And when governments get into budget pressures and you say, if I don't invest in this today, is something going to happen tomorrow? The answer is usually not. Is usually no. It's not. But when you do that for 10 years in a row, now you do have an issue that has become big and become urgent. And you can start investing tomorrow, but it's back to fixing the lagoon. It's not a tomorrow fix. It's another, it took you 10 years to get here. It's going to take you years to get back out of it. And so I think that's part of the education piece and working with utilities and working with local governments is we have to develop this culture of continuing routine maintenance and continuing to stay ahead of it even when it's not risen up and biting us. And because unfortunately when we do that, then we end up with these cost swings that are really, really difficult to manage. But it's such an asset-heavy industry that it's very hard to do that because the problems don't arise fast and they don't fix fast.
Yeah, we do a lot, as Aaron touched on, and as Todd sort of talked about with where some of what we presented with the operation and maintenance plans, we do our best to work with the utilities to try to come out with as much of a proactive plan as is cost effective for the current situation, and then work towards identifying what are their issues, what are their causes, and how can we reduce those. Even as Todd said, you'd brought up if you buried all utilities, but I can tell you 2 years ago we had a utility that had an area where the utilities were buried and it flooded, and then because of damage somewhere else, they needed to access the portion that was flooded, but it was difficult and dangerous. And so there is no one size fits all. There is no magic bullet that fixes things. So it's taking whatever proactive approach we can to work together and plan to steadily improve and reduce and identify what are those problems and what are those causes.
Courtney? And this will be the last question that we'll take for now.
I was just wondering, when you look at the causes of some of the spills, obviously with the maintenance issues, that can be solved, but when you're looking at like equipment breaks and like utility hits and stuff like that, is that a reasonable or realistic problem that we can solve? I mean, to me it seems like a lot of accidents, and I don't know if there's like standard operating procedures best practices that can reduce that, but is that something that can be solved?
Yeah, and that's where some things happen, but there's a maintenance aspect, there's a proactiveness. If you have a utility that doesn't check their generators and the generator doesn't flip on, or they have a switchboard that's from 1972 that hasn't been wired properly and gets the slightest surge and it goes out, those types of equipment failures can be prevented by good O&M procedures up front. So we look at, okay, when was the last time if a switch at a lift station goes out? When was the last maintenance of that switchboard? What was was it just up for renewal? Did you just put it in? Did it work before? So we look at all those factors. And I think though some might be kind of an anomaly or things just break, I think in the long term, and you look at the long trend, it can still be prevented and do better if we're proactive and are looking at those things and ensuring that the utility is doing that with their equipment. So, does that answer your question?
What about like utility hits? You see one utility hit another. I mean, is that?
Are you talking about where two utilities come together in the collection system, or
you're talking about like a line break caused by digging in the backyard?
Yes.
Or something?
So
there's some reduction.
Yeah, it depends on if it's the utility. I think if it's Brevard County Water Department's putting in a water main and they hit the force main, that's probably something that the county would have coordinated on. But if you have a telecommunications company that's just directional boring some internet cable and they hit a force main, clearly that the utility wasn't involved or that wasn't any action of theirs. It was the utility company that hit it. So we look at those factors of who hits it, why, and the outcome. Most of those are localized and contained, and they can dig out and contain them, from my experience. But
Depends on the communication, coordination. Are all of the various utility or lines or pipes, are they identified? Are they available? Are people coordinating? Is there, like a call before you dig number? Does this exist? Is that available in the area? Are all of these things are factors. So the simple answer is what you're bringing up can be reduced, but it's a complex situation.
And if we find out that a utility has a stretch of line that wasn't on a map, wasn't on a survey, they called before their dig, no one knew it was there, the utility didn't even know it was there, and it got hit, that's on the utility to an extent. So all that we look at that and factor that in.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It was well worth it for us, and we appreciate you coming all the way from Tallahassee to be with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, and I have the action items written down relative to the website, the number of SSOs, the IRMA, and the watershed information. So, thank you.
We appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
We are going to take, I guess, a 10-minute break. So we'll be back at 10:46, please. Again, we really appreciate the report from Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the fact that they came all the way from Tallahassee to be with us today. We also really appreciate our local utilities who have agreed to be here, and we're very thankful that you all have chosen to participate with us today. So thank you so much for being here. And Todd, you're going to be...
That's what I hear.
All right.
Okay, so we've got a utility panel here that represents some of our local utilities, and the goal today is to talk through a few questions about where we're at today, where we're going with utility operations that as it relates to nutrient loads in the lagoon, and where opportunities exist for so that we are better educated on some of the challenges that the utilities face, as well as where there's a connection to the work that we're doing as the Oversight Committee. And one of the hopes that I have today, too, in talking through, and one of the first questions that we'll deal with is, what has been done to date? And I think that's a really important piece, because we talk about all the things that need done, and absolutely we've got activities that we need to move forward on, and I don't think there's any debate that we want to continue to reduce nutrient load into the lagoon. It's also, just like we talked about, of the muck load and everything else that's happened in the lagoon. It wasn't 20 years ago that wastewater discharges all went to the lagoon at widely varied levels of treatment. And so the industry as a whole has progressed tremendously, still has a long way to go, but I think that's important too, is let's recognize the successes we have had, recognize the challenges that we're facing today, and then work collaboratively to find a way forward. So to start off, I would just like each of our panelists to introduce themselves with your name and the organization you represent, and what your role is there.
This is Jim Helmer with the Utility Services Department for Brevard County, and I'm the director.
Ralph Reigelsperger, City of Melbourne Utilities and Public Works Director.
Scott Barber, City of Cocoa Beach, Water Reclamation Department Director.
Joshua Surprenant, City of Cape Canaveral, Community Engagement and Deputy Public Works Director.
Okay, so the first question we'll start off with is, and we had discussions on both wastewater discharges and also reclaimed water, is what work is being done or has been done related to your wastewater and or reclaimed water programs that reduces the risk of nutrient or other impacts to the lagoon?
Okay, we're in our 5th year of slip lining pipes, and we'll continue to continue to slip line until we complete all the areas in upcoming years. We're also working in IRL projects to connect more people from septic to sewer. The South Patrick force main replacement has been completed. The North Riverside Drive force main replacement is currently under design, so the replacement of the two lines will reduce breaks and future discharges. Especially with that North Riverside, we've experienced many breaks over the years unexpectedly because the pipe isn't that old. In addition to the slip lining, there's many other projects in design or construction that will replace lift stations and force mains that will reduce the chances of failures in the future.
So just real quick, before we move on to another, the term slip lining, can you just give us a little indication of what that is and how that relates to the nutrient issues?
Well, lining of old pipes, and sometimes clay pipes and other material that have been there for 50 years, and are leaking with inflow and infiltration into the pipeline. So we were inundated during the last fall storm, and our goal is by lining these pipes to keep them from leaking, that we're going to reduce the amount of water that enters the system that we have to treat.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted real quick, Jim, the Riverside line replacement, it's actually an enlargement, correct? It's going from a 24-inch to a 30-inch pipe?
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
Is there a date on that, Jim? I know you said it's in design, right, currently?
The design hopefully will be completed towards the end of this year. It could take up to 2 years for construction. There's a lot of utilities and a lot of things in the way.
Thank you.
Jim, how many miles of pipe do you guys have to
Could we just let them get through the question and then we'll ask, let everybody get through and then ask questions? Would that be okay? Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ralph Reigelsperger, City of Melbourne, and I think you're going to probably hear the same answers as it goes down through the line. We too have been doing a lining project in regards to our gravity sewer system. It is done mostly in regards to adding infrastructure age extension to them to approximately 50 years, but it does minimize the number of joints that contribute to the I&I that Jim had referred to. We still have issue with laterals associated where they tie in, so when we cut them out, that doesn't necessarily fix the issues there. The City of Melbourne has done small pilot projects to try to do lateral projects to extend it at least up to the end of the right-of-way at the mains to help reduce that I&I, because that's one of the key components of it there. We have historically spent about $1 million to $1.5 million a year in regards to lining, but we're also doing our manhole rehabs associated with that to help prevent, again, in the I&I. Historically, and I can't take credit for this because this was done before I got there, but the discussion in regards to power outages, the lift stations, we got approximately 100 lift stations in our collection system. After a couple storm events that occurred before I got here, the city wised up, recognized the problem there, so we have permanent generators at a number of our key lift stations. We have backup generators to help support those other generators, and then we also have portable pumps on lift stations that doesn't have to be addressed immediately. We actually put them on a route in regards to we go there and we pump them, just pump over to the force main, we go to the next lift station, pump down because it doesn't need immediate attention. Another thing I would like to add in regards to, it's not really addressing the SSOs, but at our Grant Street wastewater treatment facility, we've done improvements at that facility in regards to having additional capacity there in regards to during our mechanical integrity test for our injection well. We actually have a permit to discharge treated wastewater, but we actually keep it all on site, at least for the last 2 times, and then still process it into the injection well. And I'm trying to see what else we're doing historically. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Okay, and just to add in, one of the, the utility industry is notorious for acronyms, so I'll try to add in some of those. I&I is, for those around the room, is inflow and infiltration. And so infiltration is typically where if there's a defect in a pipe or a manhole or any underground infrastructure where groundwater or stormwater can get in through those little pieces. Inflow is much more devastating, and you heard about clean out caps, and that's where If someone pulls off a cleanout cap in their yard, and you now have a big hole that's a way for stormwater to get into that sewer system, and that creates this massive inrush of water. And sewer systems, sanitary sewer systems, are designed to take the amount of flow coming from your toilet, from your shower, not the massive amounts of rainfall that happen on streets. And so the I&I term that was mentioned, that's what that stands for.
It's going to be a repeat too about slip lining. Just to give a little bit of background, 2-year project of slip lining, about 14.5 miles of pipe in Cocoa Beach at a cost of about $4.2 million. We thought we were doing a pretty good job. Then Irma came along and the rain event in October. North service area north of 520 was impacted greatly by I&I. The sewer system, collection system was overwhelmed. Go with our consulting engineer, did some design work. We're in the process of trying to fix that problem right now with the force main extension. Gravity line also needs to be replaced, so this is probably going to cost us probably about another $1 million just to do this repair and rehab. On a positive note, we did a major plant upgrade, finished that in 2015. Basically, the cost was $20 million. A part of that upgrade was ASR well. We thought we'd be able to store excess water during rain events. The ASR well, as far as injection, everything's fine. Recovery did not work for us. With our consultants, we asked if UIC in Tallahassee would re-permit the well as an injection well. That permit modification became effective in May. So now we have the ability to inject 2 million gallons a day down that injection well instead of discharging to the river. So that's a positive. Right now our TMDL for discharge is about 4,000 pounds of nitrogen and a little over 1,000 pounds of phosphorus. We think we can reduce those discharge days by 75% or greater with the ability to use the injection well now. And then one other issue is on-site generators. Typically we've had portable generators we've had to tow around to 8 lift stations. Staff time, everything else, we've budgeted for on-site generators for all the lift stations. So that's going to help us for any future storm events also.
Okay, and I will continue with acronym bingo, which is ASR, is Aquifer Storage and Recovery, and it's a technique that's being used by utilities to take treated water and place it into the aquifer. It essentially creates a bubble down there that of a consistent water quality that then often can be brought back at that same water quality. Very similarly is underground injection control, or UIC, where it is more of a disposal type approach, and you just heard of that conversion. And then the last one that was used was TMDL, which is total maximum daily loads, and has to do with nutrient discharge limits to water bodies. And that ties in with the talk that you heard from DEP earlier with the basin management action plans, where individual surface water basins the DEP is working to establish TMDLs that on nutrient loads that are safe to achieve the water quality objectives that they're looking for. And so the TMDL approach allocates objectives of those loads to various entities that discharge.
I think it's important I say I'm from Cape Canaveral. I don't think I mentioned that. So I thought I'd say that before I even get going. So I've only been with the city for about 2.5 years, and I've been in public works for most of that. So a lot of the projects that we're currently doing are coming to an end or just ramping up. So I'm seeing a lot of the stuff I'm about to say is, you can see if you drive through the city right now, we have kind of barriers up everywhere. And a lot of this stuff is, like I said, coming to an end with existing SRF loans. So before my time, we had constructed, very, very close to my time coming on though, a 2.5 million gallon reclaimed water tank, and it was an SRF fund that was from 2016. It was an $8 million, I guess, just loan. And then we're currently replacing Force Main 3. This is a force main that used to run like this through the city, and now it's going to run like this. So through property, easement, working private-public partnerships. We're now kind of taking something that has historically leaked into the central ditch and replacing, fixing, and upgrading, kind of modernizing the system. You know, Cape Canaveral is 1.9 square miles. It's 93% built out, so a lot of it right now is retrofitting and just kind of getting everyone on the same page. You guys are speaking to hearts and minds. So we're doing that also, and that'll come later with success stories. Something we're doing on one of our oldest city streets, Helmer Road. It's half paved, half not paved. We're replacing basically 3/4 of a gravity sewer line. Again, leaked historically. It's real close to the river. We're fixing those manholes also. We're lining pipes. We're slip lining things. We're lining manholes, trying to take care of any infiltration. FDP hit it. You guys have all hit it. Come storms, manholes get pulled. We're starting to kind of lock those down, replacing existing ones that are in spots that we know have been pulled in the past, and if they're low-lying, bringing them up. So a lot of that throughout the city. Canaveral City Park was a recent stormwater exfiltration project, and with FDP, we're permitting to put all excess reclaimed water into that system. That system can, on annual, take an estimated 30 million gallons of stormwater. So, you know, any city project, whether it's a government building, a condo, apartment, high-rise, mixed use, we're trying to push, and we're pushing, storm vaulting, stormwater, capture the 8 of the 10 drops, keep them on site. We're currently in the process of obtaining another SRF loan. We have 8 other wastewater and plant projects, and I can list those later when we talk about future stuff, but we're in the process, working with council. And then kind of the same stuff about manholes, upgrading pump stations and lift stations, and lining pipes. So everything that can be done, but it's a long process. I'm learning that. I'm learning it does take a long time to get the money. It takes a long time to get the things done. And it's fun to watch, but on the community engagement side, you really have to educate, because people want to know why it isn't happening today and why it's 2 years from now that we're even going to break ground. Because it's Virginia hit it, turn dirt projects. It is not overnight. We do not have the land to put a lot of the stuff that we want to do. And I know we'll talk about that with future questions, but I don't think I used any acronyms except for SRF.
SRF.
There you go. I'll let you do that. Go ahead.
So that is State Revolving Fund, and you heard a little bit about funding challenges, but the SRF program is established, ultimately administered through the state, but originally with federal funds and a pool of money. It's called a revolving fund because it creates a pool of money that then is low-interest loans to utilities that are paid back to replenish the fund, and then it essentially self-perpetuates, but has some advantageous terms and doesn't require quite all of the challenges of going directly to the bond markets that traditional bond does. To move on, I think I want to kind of combine the next 2 questions. Is there additional work? We just heard there's a lot of things going on. We heard slip lining and working on maintenance on pipes and capacity changes, raising manholes, generators, education. What additional work with your wastewater and reclaim program needs to happen that would further help reduce nutrient contributions to the lagoon? How are you moving forward with that work, and what barriers do you see to being able to move that type of work forward within your communities?
Okay, we're currently negotiating task order with HDR Engineering to study the South Beaches sanitary sewer overflow alternatives. They'll study the whole system and find out what more can be done in the future to reduce discharges, because hopefully they'll find some opportunities that we haven't thought about yet. We're also in the process of reuse improvements in the South Central and South Beaches area. We've added a storage tank and a reuse high service pump at South Central and replacing reuse and high service pumps and piping in South Beaches. As far as barriers, we don't really have any idea of any barriers that are keeping us from moving forward with what we need to do, so I think we're okay as far as barriers go.
Okay, you got a great introduction to SSOs, because that was going to be like 2 minutes or maybe 50 minutes of my presentation. All the items associated with it, but the key ones, the infiltration and inflow, which we discussed about with our slip lining, is obviously being taken care of. Education, I cannot emphasize enough in regards to how important that is. And then best management practices, it was kind of discussed in regards to when contractors go out to work. I don't understand how come they can't do the call before you dig, the 1-800. Our biggest discharge occurred when somebody decided to drill through the side of a 16-inch force main right by the O'Galley River. And what made it worse was even one of our contractors. But had they followed the proper procedures, the best practice in regards to doing their work, just having the education there, even though we had inspectors there trying to tell them, sometimes they know better than us. I think that's the key component of it. The other problem we're having in regards to our collection system is the what we call FOG, fats, oil, and grease, so you don't have to. Our last incident was where it accumulated into a sanitary collection line in regards and then overflowed through the manhole eventually, which we were able to clean quickly and just had a few gallons, that's a relative term, a few hundred gallons come out, but teaching the public. So what we're trying to do with that, and we've already started, is we have an environmental community outreach program in regards to a number of printed literature that goes out to try to educate people in regards to the effects that they have. And we're also doing it on our with our public information officer in regards to putting them on our social medias to say, hey, look, it takes all of us to create this problem. It takes all of us to fix it. And these are some of the things you need to look at in regards to you may be a contributing factor to it. So that's what's coming up. One project we were looking for, it came up in regards to what are the limits on total nitrogen and et cetera in regards to reclaimed water. We have a project that was recommended by you that was approved by the county, which will be taking place. It will be cutting down our nitrogen in our reclaimed water significantly. So in the irrigation process, that will be happening. We're in design right now. And as you've learned, all very familiar with the whole process you got to go through, anticipating construction, wrapping up, 18 or being significantly completed or started. I can't remember which way it goes. 18 to 24 months. So that's what we have going on.
What's the dollar value on that project?
Well, you guys were recommendation was over $5 million. So we thank you very much. I don't know the total damage that's going to cost the additional part in regards to the city, but it's going to be a beneficial project for the everybody involved. Thank you.
For the future, one of the things that we've tasked our consulting engineers with is a comprehensive collection system analysis. Modeling everything else to be done as far as what events the system can handle. And out of this study, we'll be able to identify capital projects and then prioritize those moving forward. Obviously, continued slip lining. We budget approximately $500,000 a year for infrastructure upgrades. Of course, we have our own TV truck, so videoing lines, line cleaning will still be moving forward. One of the big things that's going to be happening for us is some plant upgrades that are going to be happening in FY 19 and 20. With the upgrades, we'll be able to handle peak hydraulic capacity a little bit better. Our weakness right now at the treatment plant is we have gravity sand filters that, while they do a great job when everything's running normal, any kind of hydraulic loading on the plant, tank structures can handle it, pumps can handle it, but the filters are our Achilles heel, so those will be replaced. And we think we can, according to the engineer, be able to increase the peak hydraulic capacity by about 6 million gallons a day. As far as barriers, the way I read this was Cocoa Beach has probably the lowest sewer rates in the county. We're in competition sometimes with Rockledge based on 5,000 gallons of consumption. One of the things that happened this year is the North Banana River project took precedence. Obviously, other projects were deferred that were planned for this year. So revenue is part of our barrier, I think, as far as moving forward with some of these projects. The plant construction is going to be financed through an SRF loan. We anticipate that the plant modifications are going to be about $5 million.
Could you just, you mentioned your CCTV program. Could you just talk about that a little? I know a lot of times that aspect of technology isn't understood, and I think that it's a real important piece of maintenance. Could you just give a quick overview of what you do with that?
One of the things we do is right now, in the past, what we did was take a proactive approach, would televise lines on a frequent basis. Right now, it's more of a reactive approach, but what we can do is the crew goes out with the camera, puts it down the manhole, televise that segment of line. Actually, the video comes back. We can see a lot of our lines are vitrified clay. We can see cracks in the lines. If there's any infiltration coming in that way, we can also look at the tie-in for the lateral for the homeowner. We've helped identify the location of that for homeowners. So we want to start doing more of that. I think that would be in our best interest as far as trying to prioritize where we need to slip line again. But I don't know if that answers the question or not.
No, I think it's just helpful because it's real easy for a lot of times to just think about, yeah, you flush the toilet or take a shower and it just goes away. But there's a lot of technology surrounding operations of these systems that is many times hidden. So, okay.
The short list in Cape Canaveral is we have 4 lift stations we want to rehab. We have 2 plant upgrades because we bought the same sand filters I think Cocoa Beach did. So we want to put some disc and drum filters in. And we don't really have any buildings around some of our pumps. So they're just kind of rotting away in the salt and just, you know, degrading over time. We go in, we fix them, we paint them, we fix them, we paint them. It's kind of endless maintenance. So we want to build some buildings around there. We want to improve the SCADA system, and I'll let you speak to that, Todd. And we have some force mains, but there's the constant, you know, backup oxidation ditch, new lift stations. There's reclaim in most of the city, but there are parts of the city that don't have it, so like that would obviously help us. Barriers, we don't have any land, just not a lot left. The plant itself is nearly built out, so we don't really even have room for another tank. So we would have to go into the park next door, which is right behind some folks in a very nice part of town. So there would obviously be some barriers and hurdles there. Funding, I think we're all saying that. And then something I made a note, and I heard Scott kind of talk about it. We do annually increase the sanitary sewer fee by 5%. Currently, a single-family home, 1,000 gallons is $25.65, and then it's $5.79 for each 1,000 gallons beyond that. But we do try to keep up. Because we know that obviously the costs of things go up, and we're just trying to keep up with everything else. But we are finishing an ox ditch project. Right now we have pipes all over Public Works. We're bypassing things to fix, you know, the left side. We're bypassing to the right side, and then we'll go back and do the opposite. But it all kind of is contingent upon this future SRF loan if council sees that way to go with it. But then it just comes down to funding.
And SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition. And it's, you know, again, back to the technology. There's significant technology around these types of systems, and those are automation that in many cases serves to detect when there's problems. So a lot of the pump stations that you heard about will have high-level alarms so that if the water comes up, that they know to respond with crews. It can control when pumps turn on and off in the plants. It can link to, you know, making sure that quality objectives are met. And so there's just a lot of automation that can go into these plants, and the SCADA system serves that purpose. So we've heard a lot about the things that you have going on in your operation and some of your challenges and the things that you're doing specifically to within your control. Are there any challenges that are outside of your normal operations and outside of the normal utility maintenance operations where Lagoon funds could help make a difference in reducing the risk on the lagoon and to your operation impacting the lagoon?
Well, upgrading or replacing aging lines could greatly reduce discharges to the lagoon in the future. And we've been doing smoke testing in the Satellite Beach and Indian Harbor Beach area, although the results, we do not have all the results yet. But once known, repairs and maintenance, clean out caps, manholes, as well as replacement of residential lateral lines will hopefully take place. We did share with you that we did find that there were 92 caps missing in the Satellite Beach area, and if they were inundated during the storm, that would have been a significant bunch of water entering our system. There'll be some education required as to the importance of leaving those caps on in the future, so that's an important thing to consider. In addition, the Barefoot Bay utility system is particularly vulnerable based on its location for future problems. The system is very old. Funding is not available within the utility for significant pipelining or replacement. So we're doing a little bit at a time, but that small 5,000 unit, 5,200 unit utility, their rates are fairly high already for the size of their property and so forth. And so raising rates is not really feasible in Barefoot Bay to raise additional funds. But Barefoot Bay is right there by the water, so a significant event would be difficult for us. So that's one area that could stand more funding.
In regards to the barriers that we had been discussed, we pretty much share some of the same ones. Education, then anything that can be done in regards to broad community outreach to our small, just inside our city, anything in regards to assisting with that, letting the citizens know, our utility customers know in regards to how they can assist us. That's pretty much it for us. We're not one of the lower utility rate customers, so we've been fortunate enough to have some monies come into us in regards to our investment. In our long-term plan in regards to the infiltration and inflow with the lining projects and manholes, we actually budgeted $2.5 million a year for the next 4 years just to get incorporated with it. And one thing that we can't emphasize enough is we talked a little bit in regards to CCTV, the actually TVing and cleaning of sanitary sewer lines. That's a key component of us doing our maintenance to clean the lines and get a good observation of everything that was explained to you by another. But it also allows us the priority of how those money should be spent. I will share with you, we found a innovative type vendor that would do that kind of work. We actually spent over $500,000 and did our entire collection system with one vendor in one season to categorize all that. Now we know we got to spend a lot more money for fixing things, but it was actually very phenomenal. He would open up a manhole, drop in the cameras, and they'd take off on themselves and then come back, and it saved us approximately 20 years worth of work of information gathering. It was a worthwhile investment. I'll just share that. Thank you.
It's just going to be a repeat. Obviously, Cocoa Beach's revenues are limited as far as putting the burden on the sewer customer as far as the rate goes. I mean, you reach an extreme at one time, so slip lining, manhole restoration, obviously the city would look for funds from another source if grant monies weren't available. So.
Our next 8 big projects are SRF, so Save the Lagoon funds would help speed it up, but I mean, it's all being planned. It's just money.
So you talked a little bit, I heard a lot about laterals and clean outs. Are there those programs, though, that relate to private residents? Is that a place, does that have significant impact on each of you? And is there, I think that's the one place that, we've had a lot of discussion here with Lagoon funds, and it's not necessarily the place within normal operations, but once you get outside of what your scope is, but it has that impact on you being able to manage flows and nutrient discharges. Do each of you face those challenges with kind of those private contributions of excess flows and nutrients that is a place that would benefit you, or no?
Well, I think we do have a lot of that, and that's what the smoke testing was meant to find out. And I think your Lagoon program has some funding set aside already to assist on the private side of the. We can't spend money on the private side, but you guys have money set aside to try to assist when we determine what it is we need assistance with and how many lines might need to be replaced on the private side. When we went through the smoke testing, we replaced every cap that we possibly could. We had boxes of caps and just replaced them. So it'll be things like lateral replacement on private property, things of that nature that are fairly expensive that once we've figured out what we've got to deal with, we'll try to come back with some sort of a program and suggested funding for assistance for those folks to fix them.
Just a broad answer, yes, I'm assuming all of us would have that problem in regards to the private side. The philosophical, that's private, this is public, where do you spend your utility customer monies on? The property owner does have some responsibility in regards to maintaining their system. That, in a nutshell, is a whole philosophy discussion in itself.
Quick answer, yes. In Cocoa Beach, the lateral, the homeowner's responsible all the way out to the main line. It's not the property line. So that would be another issue altogether. But obviously, that's a problem for us. We'd be looking for solutions.
Same.
And I think we've kind of hit on this last question a lot, but I'll just ask it one more time. Do you have any particular success stories or suggestions of nutrient reduction opportunities related to the Lagoon program to share? And I guess somewhat to couch it based on that we've talked a lot about, I think, some success stories already. If you could highlight one or two of the things you've already talked about, what would you highlight from your program? And is that something that you would be willing to work with us on sharing from an education standpoint? And what would that look like?
Our big success story recently would be the replacement of that South Patrick Drive force main. In 2016, we experienced a break that was 1.5 million gallons discharged. So that's a big deal to us. And so that's one of our biggest recent accomplishments. And
in regards to funding, our biggest success story will be our reduction in nitrogen when we finally get through that whole process in our reclaimed water system for distribution. I'm looking forward to that because that's a project we would not have likely pursued as aggressively as we are now without that funding available.
I would just reiterate it's a success story on the North Service area. As far as eliminating any issues, especially Brightwater's and Kent Drive homeowners basically didn't have the ability to use their sewer system for a period of 2 to 3 days after that rain event. So this will be a big plus.
The stormwater system, the exfiltration we put underneath the baseball field was a way for the city to show people, not only residents, visitors, but developers that, this can be done. It's pretty easy to do. It was in the public. You see a big ditch. It was like Parks and Rec where we had the pit for about 6 months. And it was a joke at first. People were making fun of it on social media, but then they start to understand what's going on while we're digging up the outfield. Did the same thing at the new City Hall project. And we have hotels coming, and we're trying to do the same thing with them, to update the stormwater code, to talk about green infrastructure, to explain why it's so important to not just sheet this off into the road. And we're split by A1A, and there really isn't any stormwater on that road whatsoever, so it really kind of just goes 1 block east, 1 block west. So that exfiltration project was amazing to watch, and it really was a talking point, and still is, to what can be done, because nobody knows that there's all these vaults underneath there. They're just holding all of the water in the oldest part of the city. So it's pretty cool. Thanks.
And that's our question, so I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you so much. This was very enlightening, and all the acronyms too. Thank you. And thank you, Todd. Yes.
I was wondering, well, first up, I just want to say, I think after Matthew, and I started meeting with the county, and then I see some of you, and I know Ralph came to present to our community on water. What became clear to me was that you all do everything you can not to discharge, and that was obvious. That every step that you all take is you do everything you possibly can before you discharge. And even the one on O'Galley, you were successful in keeping that discharge from going into the lagoon and actually vacuuming basically all of that up, which was another misconception on social media that I saw. So I wanted to thank you all for your work and your attitudes and how you're very positive in trying to help the lagoon. So and that's very clear, and I appreciate that. One thing the other thing that became clear with working with the county on the smoke testing was how much education we really need to do with our community, especially with the importance of clean out caps, and how much that can exacerbate the overflows and the I&I. And I think if that's a desire of all the utilities, maybe that's something we could use our soil funds in doing, some type of campaign or education campaign to our community about the importance of that, and some of the things that the community can do to reduce the instances where we have the overflows. The other thing that, I would like to emphasize too with the community, especially for the barrier islands, is them understanding that we depend on electricity, and when we go through a storm, there's a period that we might not have that, and that's reason why we ask you. There's a reason why we ask you to evacuate, and kind of emphasize that too when we go into a storm, and maybe having that prepared prior to going into a storm, and being able to let our community know it's not just for your safety, it's also for the pressure on our utilities during the storm and things like that. So I think those are some opportunities in that we can do to help the utilities, and I'm very much interested in doing in having us help the utilities, as long as we can make sure that we're separating operation and maintenance costs. That's something I don't think that we should be paying for. But if there's an upgrade that is maybe a new technology or education or anything like that, I would be very much interested in seeing what we can do to assist.
Stephanie?
Yes.
I was going to ask, first of all, it appears that in Cape Canaveral that stormwater and the water utilities are all combined under one department.
Correct.
Is that true in the other utilities? Do you separate stormwater from, do you have one water management, or are they separate?
Two departments? Is that what?
Yeah, well,
Like
here's
infrastructure,
my bigger
utilities.
question. To what degree are you looking at green infrastructure to complement your gray when you're managing the stormwater? And by green infrastructure, I'm talking about tree canopy and other kind of low-tech ways to do that.
In every single aspect. I mean, I think you guys would kind of say the same thing. We're looking at all the options to handle existing problems, future problems, and future development. And when it comes to that, I mean, obviously we have city codes and we all have stormwater codes, and I know there's a lot of sustainability committees being formed in each city. We're looking at that from day one. And when we go to fix problems, usually, I mean, that our city manager, just like many of the city managers in Brevard County, how can we look at it from that angle? So it isn't just the old tricks being used to fix a new problem. It's new tricks for new problems and old tricks for new problems, and just trying to solve it the best way in one time. Because nobody wants to, things are going to break, but nobody wants to put a lot of investment, I mean, millions of dollars into a project that 2 years down the road completely falls apart. Like, we want something that lasts 50, 60, 70 years, as long as that asset can be, used and utilized. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty confident to say that they're looking at it, somebody in the department is looking at it from day one. You guys want to jump in there?
I was just going to say, we're separate. The city engineer has a lot of that responsibility associated with the stormwater aspect, so she would be the person to talk with. Other than after it gets constructed, my group maintains it.
We're separated also. We have Public Works Department, Utilities Department, and our stormwater comes under Virginia Natural Resources, so she may have a comment on this particular issue.
I think, first of all, I move to extend the meeting by 15 minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, 15 minutes.
If I could, I think that this body and the trust fund spending and so on should be very receptive to assisting private property owners to fix laterals, put caps on, and so on. There's a precedence in the area of septic. We fund septic sewer hookups, even though the funding mechanism in state law is it goes to the property owner. We do septic upgrades. This is low-hanging fruit as far as fixing outflow of nutrients into the river. The problem we're going to face is how to package it. Al Smith, who lives at 1432 Palm Avenue, is not going to come to the county and ask for a contract. It seems to me that a useful approach, and this is something you'd have to work with Virginia and her staff, is for each of these bodies that has, each of these entities that has laterals that hook up to your sewer system, to figure out how to have a fund that goes from a trust fund relationship to you, and then from you to the property owner who meets certain criteria. It's a carrot approach to fixing a big problem rather than a stick approach that says, hey, the smoke came out of your yard, go fix it or we'll beat you up. So I think this is an area that's probably not covered well right now in the trust fund, in the project plan, and I think it's a ripe area for us to look at.
As we talk about that area, laterals, I want to bring up the fact that I haven't found that septic is insurable, but laterals, there's an insurance binder for homeowners to get. So we can encourage homeowners, if they cannot self-insure and budget for something like that, to look into their options with their overall binders.
I think, Danielle, do those insurances, that include smoke testing? Because maybe the lateral isn't broken, but maybe it's cracked enough that it's actually getting I&I, and that might be something to talk to the insurance companies. Maybe if you do get insurance on your lateral, maybe that includes once a year, because you're paying for it. You're paying for your insurance, so maybe that includes a once a year smoke test. That might be a way for us to get the idea of smoke tests out into more of the public.
I did not see that on there, but
Well, that brings up a great point, though, because that could be, that was the first step when the county went through Satellite Beach and Indian Harbor Beach. And actually, we were expecting a little bit more lateral impact, but it looked like cleanout caps were such a big deal, which was something that they were there fixing all the way down, right there on site, which was pretty neat. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for us to help them with just that, with the smoke testing aspect, because that would be, because you all know your communities, obviously, so areas of your communities that probably have a worse instance of lateral problems than others, and maybe you could look at starting there and then submit maybe some requests to us that we could look at in this upcoming funding cycle, because that I think would be a great first step in us helping you reduce your I&I.
I liken the smoke testing similar to septic inspections.
Yeah.
So they're kind of neck and neck, and I understand that the laterals are not inexpensive to replace in many circumstances. So when I have them come up in home inspections, they're very costly.
Yeah.
Is there a correlation between beachside properties? Is the infrastructure usually, are there more problems with the laterals in beachside communities than in mainland communities? Or is that not?
Oh, I think, for one thing, in our case, in our beachside communities, the laterals are very, very old. And so they've been in need of replacement or lining for many years. So I don't know if the soils maybe make a difference also. I'm not, an expert in that. But
Our engineers seem to think that it's a harsher environment. I mean, because we have stormwater pipes too that, and I think there's a general consensus that on the beach side that there's a shorter life on that infrastructure.
Because of the saltwater intrusion?
And the water table's higher and,
All right. Yes.
So I look forward to
smoke testing and the results when they're done, because we don't know yet, and we're still not sure how much of a contribution of nutrients. But the fact that they instantly found 92 caps is probably in and of itself a benefit for the program. So I definitely look forward to learning more about that. Ralph, thank you. We put reclaimed water and upgrading of those plants in the original plan, and that you recognize that the funding from the tax, I guess, has encouraged the city to move forward quicker. That's the whole goal of what we're doing. So that's great. At some point, more of a discussion of the Barefoot Bay Challenge, I think, needs to be brought up. They're right there on the water, and it's old, and Jim, I had to make a note on that. So I think that's, if there's a way that we can get involved in that, I think we need to look at it. Otherwise, it's obviously something the county's going to have to pay attention to sooner than later. And last, the one thing that we didn't discuss, and it wasn't in the drawing from DEP, we've got the collection basically from my toilet to the wastewater system, but the system continues beyond there. We discharge that clean water or semi-clean water. And I know that I've been approached by people much smarter than I about the quality of the water that leaves our plants. And are we meeting the standards, or can we upgrade, admittedly at a cost, the water that is leaving our plants into the lagoon, the system, etc. So I think we also need to talk about the discharge, quality of discharge at the end of the treatment.
I want to add what's going into our aquifer with the discharge. I'm asked that a lot. I don't know.
Like, is there an opportunity to make that better? Is that something that you think is necessary, or what, how do you guys feel about that?
Are you talking about the water that's leaving the plant?
Correct.
Our big plants are already advanced treatment plants, and there really isn't a lot more to be gained by, so we're already doing. We have smaller plants that aren't advanced, but the cost would be prohibitive to try to do anything to upgrade them.
The only thing I would like to add is, even if we inject it into the ground or do a surface discharge, there's requirements that we have to meet, and DEP is there. It's like going to the principal's office when they come by. You sweat.
Yeah, Cocoa Beach is AWT, and as far as the injection well, that's only used on a limited basis, basically during storm events or when reuse demand is so low. But typically, if we discharge to the river, our nitrogen values are 2.5 or less, and our phosphorus values are well below 1.
And I think that's where a lot of this, the perception and the data and the communication comes into play, because I've seen numerous places where, particularly where there's advanced treatment, the reclaimed water is significantly cleaner than many stormwater ponds.
Exactly.
And so it's, a lot of this comes down to perception and education and making sure that we're able to lean on facts and data.
I'm curious, you said that there's a couple of smaller treatment facilities that it's not cost prohibitive to improve them. What kind of percentage of wastewater do you think as a whole they're treating? Because are we paying to take homeowners off of septic systems and put them into a system that's not advanced? That's where my mindset is.
I think all the septic to sewer conversions we've been talking about are going to the advanced treatment plants. I don't think we've got any planned for the little plant in Port St. John, little plant in North Brevard. I don't think we've got any conversions planned right now for those areas. So everything I think that you're looking at are going to advanced treatment plants.
So what percentage would you say, or maybe you could get us that number, of not advanced wastewater treatment centers are doing the overall?
We'll get you that number, because my people back here will make some notes for us, but it's a very small percentage. The treatment plants that we're talking about are very, very small. So, but it will be a small percentage of the total. We can get you that number.
Is there an opportunity to, if they're treating, like, if you combine them and make them an AD, is that
No, they're way far apart from
too
each
far
other
apart?
and isolated, so.
I think a very high leverage use of trust fund money is in the area of communications education. I don't recall that we have anything that is, thank you, John, anything that is specific to the world that you live in and the kind of things you'd like to bring forward. I would suggest it may be useful for you to make inputs to Virginia and her staff on what would be the message that you'd like to see go out to the public, and then perhaps you come forward with a proposal to us to add this to our communications and education line item to get the word out on the various things that the public needs to know. Because this, by and large, isn't the world you live in. It is a world that we should be living in, and I think we ought to spend some money on it.
And can I piggyback on that, because there are a few things. First off, Ralph was talking about their upgraded reclaimed water plant, and I love Melbourne, City of Melbourne's email system. Whoever does that does a great job. Ralph, pass it along for me if you would. But I did get the one about the reclaimed water, that they had a reclaimed water training or something. And again, I don't sleep and dream about reclaimed water, but I just want to make sure that we drive home the point of proper use of reclaimed water, and this might be a good opportunity to tell people about the new upgraded plant. I know a lot of citizens always wonder, well, what is my government doing for me? What are my tax dollars doing for me? That might, again, be a good idea to get people excited about it. And then Joshua said something about the exfiltration, and it's that people don't even know that it's there. And in the communications world, that's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing that they don't know that it's even there. Everyone should know about it, and there are some really amazing videographers and production companies in the area. There's a guy in the back of the room who's been mentioned a couple times who might help you show that off. And especially with all the hotels that are coming in, I think if you can get that word exfiltration on the mouth of every citizen in Cape Canaveral, if there's hotels that are looking to come in, I think they're going to hear that not just from the city, but they're going to hear that from other residents. And the other points of information they get that from might encourage them to go that route. So to John's point, connecting with Virginia and talking about communication, education, I think that is just key.
All right. Real quick.
So I'm just trying to figure out how we move from here. And, maybe if we could get from you all, the major points where you all think we need to get the message out to the community, and then we can put together a project and a funding source for that and work with you all on coming up with that type of campaign or whatever we end up doing. But I wanted to just say thank you very much. I think all of you have really reacted well to what the community was asking for in terms of reducing the discharges, and I think all of you, have been very open and cooperative, and I think the county has done a tremendous job in speeding up all the projects that were pretty much already in line, but people just didn't realize that. And so I just want to say thank you all for everything you all do.
Thank you. We really appreciate you being here and all of the hard work that you all are doing. Thank you. It's very educational. I have one card for public comment. George Rosenfeld? All right. All right, excellent. Do we have any other final comments? No. All right. Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.